Chapter 879. The bamboo monarch, who had been quietly sitting on the chair in the inner palace, looked at Lin Yuan with an expression of admiration. The bamboo monarch was different from Chef Supreme. Chef Supreme had only seen Lin Yuan in the Radiant Moon Palace a dozen days ago, but the bamboo monarch had already seen Lin Yuan half a year ago in the royal capital's outskirts. At that time, Lin Yuan had been in a sorry state, covered in blood as he stood behind the Moon Empress. He had almost been killed by Qing Wu. He had looked so young and immature. It had only been half a year and that immature youth had already grown to such a level? Moon Empress, your disciple's sacred source life form is quite interesting. I can sense that the sacred source life form is only a 2-star life form, but it seems to have more than one function. As one of the 3 Class 5 creation masters, the bamboo monarch's ability to detect sacred source life forms was far superior to Zhou and Gu Lang. The bamboo monarch had immediately probed Lin Yuan's sacred source life form the moment he activated it. Like the other low-class creation masters, the bamboo monarch could sense that there were thousands of barriers on the surface of Lin Yuan's sacred source life form. These barriers prevented the bamboo monarch's spiritual energy from penetrating it. However, when the bamboo monarch activated his comprehended willpower, his willpower evolved into laws and the laws evolved into a world. The bamboo monarch realized that willpower, laws and worlds could penetrate the barriers on the surface of Lin Yuan's sacred source life form, so the bamboo monarch did the same. However, after breaking through a few hundred weak barriers, the bamboo monarch realized that his world power had encountered a thick layer of obstruction. This thick barrier was even more solid than the weak barriers from before. However, it was easy for the bamboo monarch to use the world power to break through this barrier. However, the bamboo monarch was not sure if his invasive probing would affect Lin Yuan. If his probing really affected Lin Yuan, the Moon Empress wouldn't let him off. Therefore, the bamboo monarch suppressed his curiosity and chose to ask the Moon Empress instead. The Moon Empress did not answer the bamboo monarch's question. Instead, she changed the topic. Chef Supreme's disciple's sacred source life form has already reached 3-star and is at the critical point of 4-star. He only needs an opportunity to break through 4-star and transform from the infant stage into the growth stage. I believe that Zhongzai's battle with Lin Yuan is a good opportunity. The Moon Empress did not wish to discuss Lin Yuan's sacred source life form with the bamboo monarch. The woman that had appeared behind Lin Yuan was his sacred source life form, and the sword that the woman had turned into was also his sacred source life form. These 2 completely different sacred source life forms had the same sacred source aura, so they were definitely the same type of sacred source life form. This meant that Lin Yuan's sacred source life form had 2 forms, which the Moon Empress had never encountered before. When the Moon Empress had seen him in the Radiant Moon Palace, she had discovered that he had the ability to hide his spirit chi professional rank. Now that he thought about it, Lin Yuan's ability to hide his identity as a spirit chi professional should be the same as a sacred source life form's ability to block detection. In addition, he had displayed fire and poison elemental immunity, spiritual protection, and his current attacking stance. The Moon Empress did not know what was going on without carefully inspecting Lin Yuan's sacred source life form. However, the Moon Empress had always adhered to a principle when it came to educating Lin Yuan. It was fine as long as one knew the trump card and there was no need to reveal it to others. This was also why the Moon Empress had never asked about Lin Yuan's strength. Just now, the Moon Empress had sensed the bamboo monarch probing Lin Yuan. It was fortunate that the bamboo monarch didn't continue probing after encountering an obstruction. Otherwise, the Moon Empress would have already made a move on the bamboo monarch and interrupted his probing. Chef Supreme was originally puzzled as to why the Moon Empress had suddenly rebuked him. However, when he recalled the Moon Empress' temperament, he didn't pay much attention to it. Upon hearing the Moon Empress praise, Chef Supreme Zhongzai said with a smile, "If Zhongzai can increase the sacred source life form's star rank in this battle, it will evolve from the infant stage to the adult stage and obtain new abilities. Then I really have to thank Lin Yuan for creating such a good opportunity for Zhongzai." Lu Jie could feel the sacred source aura from Lin Yuan and Zhongzai's bodies. He could feel the sacred source life forms in his body stirring. Based on his conversation with the sacred source life form, Lu Jie knew that Zhongzai's sacred source life form's star was higher than Lin Yuan's. Gu Lang turned to look at Lu Jie as the sacred source life form in his body stirred restlessly. Zhongzai's sacred source life form is very strong. It's a pure combat type sacred source life form. My sacred source life form has already reached class 4 and obtained its second ability. However, in terms of sacred source life forms, my sacred source life form is completely suppressed by Zhongzai's sacred source life form. Senior Zhuaming will be busy from now on. As Gu Lang spoke, Zhongzai's voice sounded in the arena. Zhongzai's voice was filled with solemnity and even a hint of holiness. Heaven's crimson flame heavenly country. As Zhongzai shouted, the flames floating in the air of the fire fantasy country seemed to be on a pilgrimage. The characteristics of each flame condensed into a resplendent beam of light that shot toward the crimson flame in Zhongzai's hand. The flames floating in the air of the fire fantasy country were the residual characteristics of an alien flame after it was absorbed. After the flames absorbed the fire characteristics of the origin, the remaining parts became vigorous fire elements that nourished the bricks and tiles of the fire fantasy country. Every brick and tile of the fire fantasy country was indeed made of alien flames. After these alien flames absorbed the fire elements left behind by the flames started to move. The fire from the bricks and tiles began to jump, and finally the jumping fire turned into a dancing flame. The temperature of the fire fantasy country suddenly increased by more than 1-fold. Zhuaming sensed that the temperature in the fire fantasy country had risen to Lin Yuan's limit and was about to protect him. Zhuaming felt as though Lin Yuan had instantly turned into a towering mountain standing in the world of flames. It was as though the mountain was pure green, untainted by 10,000 fires. A majestic vitality suddenly gushed out of Lin Yuan's body and swam in it. After the rising temperature of the flames destroyed Lin Yuan's body turned pale. After the rising temperature of the flames destroyed Lin Yuan's body, the majestic vitality allowed Lin Yuan's burned body to regenerate. Lin Yuan had already activated the Jasmine Lily's exclusive skill Life Imprint. Lin Yuan sighed in his heart. The Cold Snow Pine's Cold Flame Law is a Myth 3 law and has the characteristics of ice and fire. But the Cold Flame Law's ice element characteristic is obviously higher than the fire element's resistance. Lin Yuan felt that if the princess's skirt was engraved with a pure Myth 3 fire element law, he would not have had to activate the Jasmine Lily's exclusive skill Life Imprint. The first was even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 880. Zhuaming, who had already entered the arena, retreated awkwardly when he saw Lin Yuan's skin, which had been damaged by the flames, and immediately recovered. Zhuaming felt that he had learned something new. This big shot's disciple really had endless trump cards. Every trump card could have a serious impact on the balance of the battle. Suddenly Lin Yuan felt the exceptional fire in the fire fantasy country under his feet start to become violent. The crimson color in Zhongzai's hand was like a singularity, and its gravitational force shattered half of the bricks and tiles that constructed the fire fantasy country. The shattered bricks and tiles poured into the crimson color, causing it to expand in Zhongzai's palm and evolve into a kingdom of crisscrossing crimson flames. After this crimson kingdom was formed, Zhongzai shook his wrist and threw it toward Lin Yuan. While Zhongzai was condensing the crimson kingdom, Lin Yuan had used Morbius True Data to examine Zhongzai's sacred source life form. Zhongzai's sacred source life form was called the Heaven's Crimson Fire. Its current function was to condense the fire characteristics and fire elements in the strange flames into the fire law in an instant. Zhongzai's red flame heavenly country contained a complete fire law formed by the characteristics of nearly 100,000 flames. Although this rule could only be condensed for a split second, it truly existed. In this age where the younger generation was still controlling fantasy breed phase, Zhongzai's use of the law could be said to be a dimensional reduction attack. But to Lin Yuan, Princess was the true expert at playing with willpower and laws. Princess, who had always played with willpower and laws, now had a new toy at the level of the Dark Death world. After weighing the pros and cons, Lin Yuan injected the Myth 3 Nightmare Dream Law inscribed in the princess dress into the sacred sword in his hand. This was the first time Lin Yuan used the princess sacred sword's function, the sacred sword's tip. As Lin Yuan injected the Nightmare Dream Law into the sacred sword, the ordinary sacred sword in his hand suddenly turned grayish-black, and a grayish-black mist rose from the sword tip. The mist seemed to hide a bat that was waiting for an opportunity to suck people's sweet dreams. Immediately after, he held the sword in a reverse grip and shook it. all the grayish-black swamp in the sword in his hand gathered at the tip of the sword. If the scarlet light in Xianxia's palm was the core of the fire illusion country, then the sacred source lifeform's heaven's crimson fire kingdom transcended the fire illusion country. In that case, the grayish-black color entangled on the tip of Lin Yuan's sword could already compete with the red flame heaven formed by the heaven's crimson fire in Zhongzai's palm. In the fog, a faintly discernible dark bat was howling at the entire world of flames. Then he swung his sword and struck out the Myth 3 Nightmare Law condensed at the tip of the sword. The grayish-black mist collided with the kingdom of fire that Zhongzai had thrown over. The grayish-black mist and the crimson mist alternated, making it impossible for the younger generation of Yiyang Palace, including Gu Lang, to see the situation on the stage. After a long time, the grayish-black and scarlet colors cancelled each other out. Lin Yuan and Zhongzai stood there, panting heavily. It was obvious that they had suffered quite a bit from the battle just now. The veteran faction prodigies and top faction prodigies who were spectating all had their mouths wide open. They stared in disbelief at the two people standing on the stage. An elegant-looking girl standing beside Xingyin could not help but curse at this moment. Fuck, is this the damage that a fucking youngster can do? Are these two monsters? The fight between Lin Yuan and Zhongzai had been too impactful, causing the outer palace to be in a dead silence. This made the girl's ridicule even more obvious. The elegant girl next to Xingyin also reacted at that moment. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to dig a hole in the ground. It was fine if the girls complained about it in private, but it was a different story if they said it in public. It could be said that although her exclamation just now was not malicious, it was already equivalent to disrespecting Zhongzai and Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan was fine, but Zhongzai was Chef Supreme's disciple. She had said that Zhongzai was not a human and that Zhongzai was a monster. If someone with ulterior motives were to make a fuss about it, he would be in for a hard time. The elegant girl next to Xingyin secretly glanced around and realized that no one was looking at her. Only then did they heave a sigh of relief. Their gazes were fixed on the two shining men on the stage. She saw a few top faction young masters, who she had always thought were very handsome, gaping at the two people on the stage. The girl suddenly felt that there was nothing to be fascinated about with these top faction young masters. The girl continued to look at Lin Yuan and Zhongzai, who were in the combat arena. This glance made the girl feel conflicted. Both of them were so outstanding and she did not know who to like. But if these two people could be together, it seemed like, just as a mysterious smile appeared on the girl's face, she heard a coquettish voice beside her ear. "Qianhui, are you hungry? Wipe your saliva." Zhuang Qianhui hurriedly closed her mouth and subconsciously sucked, but she did not expect to let out a slurping sound. At that moment, the majestic vitality in Lin Yuan's body was flowing rapidly, helping Lin Yuan repair his damaged body. The aftermath of the grayish-black and crimson collision had dissipated, and he looked evenly matched with Zhongzai. However, Lin Yuan knew that he was the one at a disadvantage in the collision. During the collision, his body was constantly being eroded by the fire law's power. Thanks to the Princess Robe's fire resistance and the massive vitality, he had survived. Logically speaking, Zhongzai's sacred source life form, the heaven's crimson fire, relied on nearly 100,000 fire characteristics and fire elemental energy to form the fire law. It was at most at Mythi. Even with the Burning Sky Ho's exclusive skill Fire Fantasy Town, which doubled its power, it would not reach Myth 2. On the other hand, the Nightmare Dream Law that Lin Yuan used was a Myth 3 existence. Logically speaking, the grayish-black color should crush the scarlet color. However, the Princess Robe's law was very different from the Heaven's Crimson Fire's law. What Lin Yuan had just unleashed was not the complete Nightmare Law but the Myth 3 Nightmare Law's energy. After a period of charging, Lin Yuan could use the Myth 3 Nightmare Law to unleash such an energy attack again. Zhongzai's sacred source life form, the Heaven's Crimson Fire, had condensed a complete law, but Zhongzai had sacrificed it. The explosive power produced by sacrificing the law was not on the same level as simply using the law's energy. The second was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 881. He finally knew the damage he could cause when he used the Myth 3 law engraved in the Princess Robe to launch a blow. Each attack could reach the level of a suzerain/Mythi phase all-out attack. Although the power was slightly weaker than Lin Yuan had expected, Lin Yuan was still very satisfied. After all, this attack could be used repeatedly after the cooldown. Lin Yuan had considered it before deciding to use the Nightmare Law. The Myth 3 laws engraved in the princess dress were the Vicious Poison Law, the Cold Flame Law and the Nightmare Law. Lin Yuan could use these 3 laws to cause damage to Zhongzhe. However, after using the energy within the laws, Lin Yuan would not be able to enjoy the resistance of the laws. If the Cold Flame Law were to be unleashed, Lin Yuan would probably be roasted into pieces the moment he unleashed this attack. Lin Yuan was also worried about using the Vicious Poison Law because the blue venom flame puppet that Zhongzhe had just summoned had the ability to use fire poison. Although the blue venom flame puppet had entered a near-death state and been put away by Zhongzhe, Lin Yuan did not dare to guarantee that Zhongzhe would not have other ways to heal the blue venom flame puppet and let it continue fighting. Or perhaps Zhongzhe had other fays that could use poison that he had not summoned. Therefore, after some consideration, using the Nightmare Law was Lin Yuan's best choice. At this moment, Zhongzhe, who was on the stage, suddenly entered a strange state. He closed his eyes tightly. After Zhongzhe entered this state, the Saint Genesis aura on his body abruptly changed, becoming even denser than before. However, the process of this sacred source aura change was like a blooming flower bud. It still needed some time for it to fully bloom. Upon seeing this, Swimming's expression tensed up. Swimming could sense that Zhongzhe's sacred source life form had entered a state of metamorphosis and growth. For a sacred source life form to increase its star grade at each growth stage, it only needed to accumulate the required resources according to the sacred source life form's characteristics. However, for a sacred source life form to metamorphose and grow, it was no longer a problem that could be solved by simply accumulating resources. It also needed an opportunity. This opportunity was very rare, just like how spirit chi professionals needed fate to comprehend a willpower rune. Once the opportunity to descend was missed due to some reason, who knew how long it would take for the opportunity to descend again? And Zhongzhe was currently in this opportunity. If Lin Yuan attacked Zhongzhe now, Zhongzhe, who was in a state of epiphany, would not be able to fight back. Lin Yuan could easily become the champion of the civil and martial arena, but at the same time, Zhongzhe would lose this rare opportunity. The rules of the martial arena were decided by the 13 Majesties. A competition was a competition and it emphasized absolute fairness. It was impossible for them to stop midway because of what had happened to Zhongzhe. Thus, the current situation put Swimming in a difficult position. The supreme chef of the inner palace of Yeong Palace also stood up from his chair. Zhongzhe's sacred source life form, the Heaven's Scarlet Fire, had already reached 3 stars a long time ago and was in the process of evolving from its infancy stage to its growth stage. However, he had not found a suitable opportunity and had been stuck for more than a year. For a supreme genius like Zhongzhe, who had always been on the road to becoming stronger, a year's time was simply not something he could afford to waste. Supreme Chef was ready to stop the competition on behalf of Zhongzhe. In Supreme Chef's opinion, compared to an uncontracted sacred source life form and a radiant light metal, Zhongzhe's crimson heaven flame was more important. At that moment, Supreme Chef saw Lin Yuan, who had been opposing Zhongzhe, take a few steps back and walk to the edge of the arena. Although he did not say it clearly, Lin Yuan's actions immediately made everyone understand his intentions. Lin Yuan was prepared to wait for Zhongzhe's heavenly scarlet fire to evolve before continuing the unfinished battle with Zhongzhe. Lin Yuan's actions not only made the younger generation of Yeong Palace look at him in a different light, but even the majesties of Yeong Palace looked at Lin Yuan differently. The fire in the fire fantasy country was still burning. At that moment, Lin Yuan, who had retreated to the edge of the arena with the sacred sword in hand, seemed to emit a beam of light that was brighter than the fire in the fire fantasy country. A dazzling beam of light. Standing at the edge of the arena, Lin Yuan swung the sacred sword in his hand twice, carving out 2 sword flowers. Zhongzhe's sacred source life form, the Heaven's Scarlet Fire, would have a second ability when it evolved from its infancy stage to its growth stage. At that time, Zhongzhe's strength would definitely increase. If it was purely for the reward, Lin Yuan would have rushed forward at this time. If Zhongzhe was an enemy, Lin Yuan would not have hesitated to rush forward and use his fiercest moves. However, Zhongzhe, who was standing on the martial arena, was not an enemy but an opponent. Even if they did not have a personal relationship as Uncle Li and Auntie Zhang's junior brother, Zhongzhe was considered one of Lin Yuan's people. After a full 15 minutes, Zhongzai's tightly shut eyes opened completely. When Zhongzai opened his eyes, they had become the same red color as his palm. This red color was neither bloody nor evil. It had an incomparable dignity and majesty. However, Zhongzai looked at Lin Yuan with a dignified gaze that was filled with gratitude. Just as Zhongzai was about to raise his hand to signal Zhu Ming to admit defeat, he saw Lin Yuan stride forward and stand opposite him. At the same time, Lin Yuan's clear voice sounded in Zhongzai's ears. Zhongzai, let's continue with the previous battle. I believe that if I had entered a state of epiphany, you would not have attacked me. When Zhongzai heard that, he subconsciously thought that if Lin Yuan had entered a state of epiphany, he would not have attacked Lin Yuan. But even though he said that, that was not the case. However, Zhongzai was not a bashful person. It was enough to keep some gratitude and favors in his heart. When something really happened, he would return the favor. That was what a man should do. Zhongzai looked at Lin Yuan and said, yes. In that case, I'll unleash the strongest attack after the Crimson Heaven Flames transformation. With that, the scarlet color in Zhongzai's palm completely covered the sky above the combat ring. The sky above the martial arena lit up with mysterious flame runes. These flame runes finally converged into a portal. At this moment, the crimson gate formed by the flame runes was slowly opening. While Zhongzai was channeling the heaven's scarlet fire with all his might, Lin Yuan was not idle. With a flick of his hand, a red energy element shot at the heaven-burning roar. This caused the burning sky centipede, who was fully activating the exclusive skill Fiery Fantasy Town, to enter a blissful and sluggish state. Immediately after, the red light pillar began to frantically extract the vitality from the burning sky centipede's body and pour it into Lin Yuan's vitality imprint. Chapter 882. In the face of the Diamond X/Fantasy V burning sky centipede, the Jasmine Lily's life force extraction could not cause serious damage in a short time. Lin Yuan did not want the Jasmine Lily to cause much damage to the burning sky centipede. Instead, he wanted the Jasmine Lily's reverse healing to control the burning sky centipede. The Jasmine Lily's reverse healing control effect was not a negative state. Instead, it put the body and mind in an extremely comfortable state. It was equivalent to a buff that eliminated fatigue. Therefore, phase would not have any resistance to it. After the red light landed on the burning sky centipede, the fire fantasy country that the burning sky centipede had been working hard to maintain immediately collapsed. Upon seeing the red light beam, everyone's memories seemed to be pulled back to the strange battle at the All-Star match. Even though the fire fantasy country had dissipated under the Jasmine Lily's control, the temperature on the arena did not decrease. Instead, it rapidly increased. This temperature came from Zhongzai's sacred source life form, the heaven's scarlet fire, which had just entered the growth stage. Even so, Lin Yuan had achieved his goal. He wanted to destroy the fire fantasy country so that it could not enhance Zhongzai's sacred source life form, the heaven's scarlet fire. Lin Yuan gripped the sacred sword in his hand tightly and activated his strongest trump card. It was the Dark Death World's sacred sword mode sword skill, Dark Crow Withering Strike. At that moment, red-armored angels with a pair of flaming wings on their backs descended from the red portal formed by flame runes in the sky above Zhongzai. According to Lin Yuan's senses, these flaming angels were all products of the fire element and were not real life forms. However, the gathering of the extremely dense fire element caused these angels to be filled with intelligence. After Zhongzai sent the 21st flaming angel down from the red portal, his body immediately trembled. Zhongzai had exhausted all the spiritual power in his body. Under Zhongzai's command, the 21 flaming angels summoned from the red portal wielded a flaming battle blade and shield and flapped their wings as they charged toward Lin Yuan. While Zhongzai was summoning the angels through the red portal, the half of the arena that Lin Yuan was at had been coated with a layer of darkness. Not only was this layer of darkness not dispelled by the raging crimson flames, but it was also continuously invading the area occupied by the crimson flames. At this time, Night Leaning Moon, who was sitting on the 13th chair in the inner palace of Yiyang Palace, let out a soft cry of surprise. It's actually darkness-type power of darkness. As Night Leaning Moon spoke, the expressions of the other majesties had already changed. It was obvious that they had already sensed the power that the youth had displayed in the arena. However, the top and veteran factions leaders, including Elder Long Tu and Elder Li Yun Yaoqin, looked at Lin Yuan in disbelief. Even if a 17 or 18-year-old youth was the Moon Empress disciple, he shouldn't be able to control power above the laws, right? Night Leaning Moon spoke again while the leaders of the veteran and peak forces were indescribably shocked. Although it's the dark attribute world's power, this power is only maintained at a certain level. In terms of power, it's only the power of a suzerain/myth 3-phase all-out attack. Looks like the outcome of the civil and martial duels is already clear. Night Leaning Moon's words caused the leaders of the veteran and peak powers to break out in a waterfall of sweat. The leaders of the veteran and peak factions could not help but shout in their hearts. Chief Guard world power is already very impressive, right? It had to be known that a large portion of the leaders of the veteran and peak factions present had not reached the world level in terms of power. At that moment, Lin Yuan was like the ruler of the darkness in the arena, holding his sword elegantly in the darkness. Dark crows kept flying out from the tip of the sword. There were a total of 28 dark crows. These 28 dark crows circled and danced with Lin Yuan as the center. Every time the dark crows circled, their feet would land on the tip of the sacred sword in Lin Yuan's hand, seemingly waiting for him, the ruler of darkness, to give an order. Among the combat skills and movement techniques he had learned from the body-transcending memory grass, there were quite a number of sword skills. Lin Yuan swung his sword without any moves or tests, but he integrated the strengths of hundreds of schools of thought. When he swung his sword, a dark crow hit the flaming angel's body, forming a black withering mark. The 21 flaming angels were quite brave in battle, but Lin Yuan was not at a disadvantage when colliding with them with just one sword. Lin Yuan held the sacred sword and chanted softly. Sword skill Dark Crow Withering Strike. As Lin Yuan chanted softly, the 28 dark crows returned to the tip of the sword and bloomed on it like a blooming flower. The 28 dark crows were like butterflies flying through flowers as they shuttled back and forth and collided with the 21 flaming angels. After 14 withering marks appeared on each flaming angel's body, it began to decay. The flaming angel's body, which was formed by flames, was like a withering flower of fire. As the dark crows shuttled back and forth, 56 withering marks appeared on one of the flaming angels. This flaming angel had entered a true withering state and fell from the sky onto the dark crystal ground. There was not a trace of the afterglow of flames in the withering and decaying body. As the first flaming angel fell to the ground, each of the 21 flaming angels entered a true withering state under the dark crow's attacks. Lin Yuan held the sacred sword and panted lightly. It could be said that in this battle with Xianxia, apart from the 2 myth 3 laws engraved on the Princess Luo Pao, Lin Yuan had already emptied himself. During the previous battle, the 28 dark crows that were hit by the dark crow withering strike would become more illusory with each collision. After defeating the 21 flaming angels, the 28 dark crows entered a translucent state. At this moment the 28 illusory dark crows were flying around Xianxia, who had lost all of his spiritual power, flaunting Lin Yuan's victory. Just as Lin Yuan was about to signal the left palm minister, Sui Ming, he suddenly heard a deafening shout. It was unknown who was the first to shout, Lin Yuan. Then his name resounded in the outer palace of Night Glory Palace. When he heard hundreds of voices shouting his name at the same time, Lin Yuan was slightly startled. When he turned around, he saw the sincere congratulations and astonishment in the eyes of these prodigies. When he saw these gazes, Lin Yuan knew that he had used his strength to conquer these proud and arrogant prodigies. He had used his strength to gain recognition and respect. However, Lin Yuan was not immersed in the cheers. Instead, he turned around and looked at the black crystal wall that was only one wall away from the inner palace of Yeong Palace. A bright smile appeared on his face. Although Lin Yuan could not see the Moon Empress, his smile was for her. The previous 100 flower brocade pearls were his answer to the Moon Empress regarding their growth. He had also unleashed his combat ability to the extreme in today's civil and martial duels. It could be considered as giving the Moon Empress an answer sheet of his combat ability. Lin Yuan's lips parted slightly as he faced the pitch-black crystal wall and spoke silently. Master, I won. Lin Yuan knew that his current actions were seen by the other majesties and might be interpreted as youthful insolence. However, he only wanted to convey the most direct joy in his heart to his master, the Moon Empress, who had always been watching over him. Immediately after, he lowered his head to look at the sacred sword in his hand and said softly to himself, "It's time for you to use it. Lin Yuan, you win." Chapter 883. When he said to himself, "Lin Yuan, you win," Lin Yuan revealed a nostalgic expression. Back then, when he had just supported the Fey store in the Xia region, it had been difficult for him to move a pot of usnia. It could be said that every time he buried energy ores in the usnia pot, Lin Yuan had gritted his teeth and persevered. A usnia that was not even a normal Fey was not very heavy, but its root system was very developed. In order for it to grow well, it needed a very large pot to be planted. A usnia pot with soil would weigh about 25 caddies. It was a huge burden for Lin Yuan, who could not even sense spirit qi at that time. Every time Lin Yuan carried a pot of usnia and placed it on the shelf, he would have to sit down and rest for a while. His days passed just like that. At that time, Lin Yuan's dream and longing was to maintain the small store and earn enough Federation dollars to help Zhou Xian complete her studies. Lin Yuan did not intend to spend all the difficulties on Zhou Xi's education for his younger sister, who came from the same mother. Even if Lin Yuan did not have the ability to obtain powerful Feis for Zhou Xian by relying on a small Fei store, it was still possible to save some money and obtain a defense-type Fei suitable for team combat for Zhou Xian. Who would have thought that the mediocre Lin Yuan would actually stand on the Nix Assembly's civil and martial ring 8 months later and win the championship, receiving cheers and applause? Lin Yuan felt that his journey was like a miracle. Even though there had been no lack of opportunities, Lin Yuan still had to thank his past self for his hard work. During these 8 months, Lin Yuan had almost never stopped to enjoy himself. As long as he was free, he would enhance Feis in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. Mediocrity was not just mediocrity, but the pinnacle was not willing to be at the pinnacle. Lin Yuan was not a conceited person, but he still felt that he could no longer be described as mediocre. In short, no matter what, his original intention was still the same. 8 months was just the beginning, and it was just to give him more confidence to see this vast world. Just as Lin Yuan was reminiscing, he suddenly felt someone holding his arms and legs and lifting him up. Lin Yuan came back to his senses and looked down. He found that Lu Jia, Gao Feng, Long Tao, and Li Xian had already rushed to the arena. Before Lin Yuan could speak, he was thrown up by Lu Jia, Gao Feng, Long Tao, and Li Xian. Lin Yuan, who had mastered almost all the combat skills and martial arts moves in the world through the body-transcending memory grass, only needed to flip over to land firmly on the ground. However, Lin Yuan did not do so. Instead, he smiled and enjoyed his friend's celebration. He felt his nerves, which had been taut from the battle, relax. Gulang saw Lu Jia, Gao Feng, Long Tao, and Li Xian running toward the arena, but he didn't follow them immediately. However, at this moment, Gulang still walked onto the stage. Gulang walked to Zhongzai's side and looked at the calm Zhongzai. "You didn't lose unjustly. Even if you used the sacred source lifeform Heaven's Scarlet Fire to unleash your ultimate move, you still wouldn't have a chance of winning. However, if Lin Yuan uses the last move he just used, you won't have any room to resist. Seniors Wu Ming will immediately protect you and announce that you have lost the match." Since the start of the fight, Zhongzai's eyes had been on Lin Yuan and had never left him. Hearing Gulang's words, Zhongzai immediately said, "I'm no match for him. I'm also very grateful to him. If it wasn't for him, my Heaven's Crimson Flame wouldn't have reached its growth stage. If I miss this opportunity, I wonder how long it will take for the Heaven Crimson Flame to evolve." Gulang was startled when he heard Zhongzai's words. Having known Zhongzai for more than a decade, Gulang knew how proud Zhongzai was. Gulang didn't think that such a proud person like Zhongzai would actually admit that he was inferior to someone of the same generation. Because of this battle, Zhongzai's sacred source life form, the Heaven's Scarlet Fire, evolved to the 4-star stage, and Zhongzai's strength would increase the fastest. He could use resources to raise the Heaven's Scarlet Fire's star level. During the battle just now, Gulang had keenly noticed that after Zhongzai had summoned the sacred source life form, even if Lin Yuan had strong fire elemental resistance, he was still affected by the fire elemental energy. Lin Yuan had been relying on a large amount of vitality that came from an unknown source to hold on. This allowed him to maintain a delicate balance between the speed of his injuries and the speed of his recovery. If Zhongzai's Heaven's Scarlet Fire's star level was a little higher, Lin Yuan's fire elemental resistance and vitality would not be useful. Just as Gulang was about to comfort Zhongzai, he realized that Zhongzhe had already run forward toward Lin Yuan. Gulang couldn't help but feel puzzled when he saw Zhongzhe join Lu Jie, Gao Feng, Long Tao and Li Xian. Previously, Zhongzhe had taken the initiative to introduce him to Lin Yuan, which was already not in line with Zhongzhe's style of doing things. Now after this battle, how did Zhongzhe and Lin Yuan's relationship become so good? At that moment, Xingyin looked at Lin Yuan, who had been thrown high in the arena, and sighed with a complicated expression. No matter what Lin Yuan's identity was, he now had a Radiance medal and was qualified to compete for a Radiance Envoy and the Radiance Light Knights. All these years, Xingyin had been working hard to become a member of the Radiance Light Knights. Xingyin understood that it was unrealistic for her to compete for a Radiance Envoy's position with pure healing abilities. However, now that Lin Yuan had obtained the Radiant Light Medal, it was tantamount to having one more powerful competitor. If Lin Yuan were to fight for the Radiance Envoy's position, one person would be squeezed out, thus increasing the pressure of the Radiance Light Knight Legion's selection. If Lin Yuan could not become a Radiance Envoy, he would occupy another spot in the Radiance Light Knight Legion. There were still more than 2 years before the selection of the Radiance Envoys and Radiance Knights. However, based on the strength that Lin Yuan had just displayed, even if he remained stagnant in these 2 years, there was still no suspense for him to occupy a place in the Radiance Knights. Just when Xingyin was feeling pressured, Zhuang Qianhui, who was standing beside her, spoke. "Sister Xingyin, I've decided. Lin Yuan is my man from now on. When I get home, I'll ask my old man to propose marriage." Xingyin stared at Zhuang Qianhui with her mouth agape. She then said in a serious tone, "Qianhui, some marriages aren't that easy to propose. Besides, where do you want your old man to go to propose to Lin Yuan?" Xingyin had always known that Zhuang Qianhui had been spoiled rotten by her family since she was young. Not only did she have a little princess syndrome, but she was also a little infatuated. However, Zhuang Qianhui wouldn't be so careless, right? Therefore, Xingyin planned to see if Zhuang Qianhui had guessed Lin Yuan's identity. Chapter 884. When Zhuang Qianhui heard Xingyin's words, the way she looked at Xingyin immediately became vigilant. "Sister Xingyin, I remember that you like Lord Zhongzhe. You can't fall in love with someone else so quickly. Lin Yuan is mine. It doesn't matter if I don't know where to ask my old man to propose. Big brother Li Xian seems to be on such good terms with Lin Yuan. You should know where Lin Yuan is staying, right? I'll just ask brother Li Xian when the time comes." Upon hearing Zhuang Qianhui's words, Xingyin sighed softly. Zhuang Qianhui was a direct descendant of a top-notch faction, and it was impossible for him not to have heard of the Moon Empress disciple participating in the Nyx Assembly. It seemed like Zhuang Qianhui was really infatuated with Lin Yuan. The Nyx Assembly's official meeting was about to begin, and if Lin Yuan was really the Moon Empress disciple, he would definitely reveal his identity. Once Lin Yuan's identity was revealed, no matter how much Zhuang Qianhui was favored in the family, she wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Old Master Zhuang did not dare to ascend the Leaning Moon Mountain to be a matchmaker for Lin Yuan and Zhuang Qianhui. It seemed like Zhuang Qianhui was destined to have a one-sided love. The Moon Empress, who was sitting on the throne 13, saw Lin Yuan smile through the black crystal wall and the silent words, "Master, I won." She suddenly felt a surge of warmth in her heart. This warm current flowed from her heart to her eyes, causing them to moisten. The Moon Empress hurriedly closed her eyes and took a full minute to suppress her emotions. This scene was naturally seen by the other 11 majesties who were preparing to congratulate the Moon Empress. The 11 High Lords were stunned. Apart from the incident 10 years ago, they had never seen the Moon Empress so emotional. The Moon Empress had always been a cold person, and it seemed like Lin Yuan's weight in her heart was truly immeasurable. However, His Majesty, who had also accepted a disciple, felt that the Moon Empress' reaction was very normal. Even if his disciple won the championship of the civil and martial arena, he would also feel honored. A minute later, the Moon Empress opened her eyes. She remembered that the first time her eyes had turned red was when the old man had died. At that time, the Moon Empress felt that she wouldn't have a second chance in her life to cry, but she didn't expect that she would inadvertently break her vow. When the Moon Empress saw Lin Yuan being tossed on the stage, she couldn't hold back her smile. The Moon Empress said to Mystic Moon, who was standing behind her, "Mystic Moon, Lin Yuan's clothes aren't easy to wear. Go and help him. Then send this thing to Lin Yuan and let him eat it to recover from his injuries in battle." After speaking, the Moon Empress handed a brocade box to Mystic Moon. Xian Yu took the brocade box, nodded and left the inner palace. Mystic Moon also felt that she should go and take a look at Lin Yuan. Otherwise, after the Moon Empress removed the crown pattern, it would be hard for Lin Yuan to wear the Moonlight Crown robe. After all, there were more than 300 accessories in the Moonlight Royal robe. If Lin Yuan were to figure out where to put these accessories, he would not be able to finish wearing the Moonlight regalia by the next morning. At first, when Lu Jia, Gao Feng, Long Tao and Li Xian threw him into the sky, he felt fine. However, Gao Feng's hands were really strong. If he hadn't used his body technique to adjust his balance, he would have been flipped over in 2 moves. Now that Zhongzhe had joined the quartet, Lin Yuan was surprised to find that Zhongzhe's hands were even stronger than Gao Feng's. Lin Yuan looked at Zhongzhe suspiciously. "Zhongzhe couldn't be looking for revenge after losing to me in the arena, right?" Lin Yuan felt that he was like a cake that was being hammered by Gao Feng and Zhongzhe, who were constantly moving up and down in the air. When Lin Yuan realized that his butt was being hammered, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He quickly exerted force in midair and landed gracefully on the ground. After standing on the ground and chatting with everyone, Lin Yuan took out his cell phone from the diamond face storage box. At that moment, Lin Yuan realized that there were 2 missed calls on his cell phone, and they were both from Mystic Moon. Lin Yuan quickly called Mystic Moon. Lin Yuan immediately knew why Mystic Moon was looking for him, so he turned to Lu Jia and said, "All right." He turned to Lu Jia and said, "We should go to the Night Language Pavilion to change." Mystic Moon had said that she would wait for him at the Night Language Pavilion. This was Lin Yuan's first time at the Night Language Pavilion, so he naturally didn't know where it was. However, as the young palatial lord of the Night Language Pavilion, Lu Jia should know where it was. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Lu Jia nodded. "Let Uncle Right take us there in a while." Lin Yuan chatted with everyone for a while and arranged to meet again at the Nix Assembly's main meeting. Then he and Lu Jia went to the right palm official Yuxia. Everyone in this small group knew Lin Yuan's and Lu Jia's identities, although they did not know what Lin Yuan meant when he said to change clothes. Although they didn't know what Lin Yuan meant by changing clothes, it should be related to the Nix Assembly's main meeting that was about to begin. When Yuxia saw Lin Yuan and Lu Jia walking in front of him, he said before Lin Yuan and Lu Jia could speak, "Mystic Moon called me just now. Xian Yu just called me. Let's go to the Night Pavilion together." After speaking to Lin Yuan, Yuxia turned to Lu Jia and said, "Young palatial lord, there is still an hour left before the main meeting begins. Let me help you put on Yi Chei's regal robe later." Young palatial lord, there is still an hour left before the main meeting begins. Lu Jia was about to refuse when he recalled the accessories he saw when he opened the brocade box in the Return from Faraway Manor. Lu Jia hurriedly gave up on the idea of wearing Yi Chei's imperial robes. "Uncle Yu, I'll have to trouble you later." He followed Yuxia all the way to the Night Language Pavilion and saw Mystic Moon standing at the entrance of the Night Language Pavilion from afar. When Mystic Moon saw Lin Yuan, she quickly walked over and greeted him. "Young lord, the Moon Empress asked me to give this to you. She said that it will allow you to recover from the injuries you suffered in the previous battle." As one of the Moon Empress' 2 moon envoys, Mystic Moon also felt honored that Lin Yuan was the champion of both the civil and martial arena. When Mystic Moon handed the brocade box to Lin Yuan, she congratulated him. "Your Highness, congratulations on becoming the champion of both the civil and martial arena." When the Moon Empress was having a question and answer session with Lin Yuan, Mystic Moon was not by her side, so he was not sure to what extent the Moon Empress had taught Lin Yuan. However, in Mystic Moon's opinion, it was normal for Lin Yuan, the Radiant Moon Palace's young lord, to be strong. However, Mystic Moon still marveled at Lin Yuan's growth speed more than once. Lin Yuan received the brocade box from Mystic Moon and smiled. "Thank you, Uncle Mystic." After speaking, he opened the brocade box that the Moon Empress had asked Mystic Moon to hand to him. There was a brownish-black pill in the brocade box. When Lin Yuan opened the brocade box, he smelled an extremely rich medicinal fragrance. When Lin Yuan inhaled the medicinal fragrance, he immediately felt that his entire body, including his soul, was receiving comprehensive care. Chapter 885. As Mystic Moon did not check the contents of the brocade box, he did not know what the Moon Empress wanted him to hand over to Lin Yuan. Xianyu couldn't help but start coughing. The Moon Empress really doted on the young lord as usual. His Highness had indeed lost a lot of vitality in the civil and martial arena, but that boundless vitality was obviously one of his trump cards. Even though he was hungry after using it, His Highness did not seem to be affected by it. However, the Moon Empress had actually taken out a Moon Dew rejuvenation elixir that could immediately revive a person as long as they were still breathing. It didn't matter if one's vitality was exhausted or if one's soul was shattered. It was just so that the young lord could recover from the injuries he had suffered in the previous battle. This was simply too exaggerated. However, such exaggerated doting had always been the Moon Empress style toward the young highness. The right paragon Wuxia looked at the Moon Dew rejuvenation pill in Lin Yuan's hand and swallowed his saliva. The Moon Dew recovery pill was one of the Moon Empress signature products, and only the Moon Empress had it in the entire world. It was rumored that the Moon Dew Life Recovery Elixir was made with a large number of creation species plant-type phase spiritual ingredients, and the Moon Empress contracted holy weeping moon beast's tears. Even if Chef Supreme and Bamboo Monarch were Class 5 creation masters, without the Moon Dew Revival Elixir's formula and the holy weeping moon beast's tears, they would not be able to create the Moon Dew Revival Elixir. Now, even the chief guard had to personally go to the Radiant Moon Palace to obtain the Moon Dew rejuvenation pill, but the Moon Empress had casually given it to Lin Yuan to recover from his injuries. This was too extravagant. Wuxia had already checked on Lin Yuan's injuries when leading the way just now. Wuxia was also afraid that Lin Yuan had suffered some internal injuries in the combat arena. However, after some investigation, Wuxia found that Lin Yuan's body was simply stronger than an ox. There wasn't even a trace of impurity in his body. With one look, one could tell that he was a man who had been soaking in a jar of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar. Although he did not know what the pill in the brocade box was, True Data had already probed its effects. Lin Yuan didn't want to waste such a precious elixir. Moreover, there were no injuries on his body that required such an effective elixir to recover. Lin Yuan quickly said to Mystic Moon, "Uncle Xian, I'll keep this pill first. I still haven't finished the jujube powder that Master ground for me with the smooth crystal silk jujube." Upon hearing that, Mystic Moon nodded and did not insist on Lin Yuan eating the Moon Dew rejuvenation pill now. In Mystic Moon's opinion, it would not be too late for Lin Yuan to eat the Lunar Dew Life Recovery pill when he really needed it in the future. After putting away the brocade box containing the Lunar Dew Revival pills, he took out the box containing the Lunar Regalia. When he opened the box again and saw the Moonlight Royal Robe, he couldn't help but sigh at its beauty. Mystic Moon hurriedly took the box that contained the Moonlight Royal Robe and said, "All right. Your Highness, take off your spirit chi clothes first. You only have an hour to wear the Moonlight Royal Robe, so you don't have much time." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan quickly took off his spirit chi clothes. Anyway, everyone here was a man and there was nothing to be shy about. Mystic Moon immediately helped Lin Yuan put on the Moonlight Crown Robe. Just like Mystic Moon and Lin Yuan, Wuxia also helped Lu Jia put on Yi Chei's Royal Robe. Compared to the Moonlight Imperial Robe, Yi Chei's Imperial Robe wasn't any less complicated, and it was just as difficult to wear. However, Mystic Moon and Wuxia were very familiar with it. When Mystic Moon helped him put on the Moonlight Royal Robe, Lin Yuan used his hand to gently touch the layer of apricot flower patterns on the collar. After touching it, Lin Yuan found that this layer of apricot flower patterns was not embroidered. It was like petals of apricot flowers growing on the Moonlight Royal Robe. When he touched it, the layer of apricot flower petals still had the toughness of fresh plant petals, which made Lin Yuan rather curious. Mystic Moon watched Lin Yuan use his hand to touch the layers of apricot flower patterns on the Moonlight Royal Robe's collar and said with a smile, "Your Highness, these petals you touched came from a creation seed apricot fay. Your Highness, the petals you touched came from a creation seed apricot fay." However, when other accessories are worn later, this layer of apricot flower petals will not be obvious. The radiant pearl collar will cover this layer of apricot flower patterns. The petals on this creation seed apricot fay are only subclass spiritual materials for the base of the Moonlight Royal Robe. It is to use the beauty of the apricot flower's heavenly shadow to set off the radiant pearl's brilliance. Otherwise, these apricot flower petals are not qualified to appear on the Moonlight Royal Robe. Upon hearing Mystic Moon's words, Lin Yuan secretly clicked his tongue and felt that the Moonlight Royal Robe had suddenly become heavy. Lin Yuan did not dare to imagine how much radiance dollars he was wearing it. Among flower species phase, the flowers could be said to be the most precious part of them. It was only a matter of whether or not the creation seed's petals were used as materials to decorate the moonlight royal robe. This extravagance was truly unimaginable. Lin Yuan finally understood why he could not find any clues when using Morbius True Data to check this moonlight royal robe. Morbius had not become a fantasy breed and was still unable to examine things at the creation seed level. It was just like how Lin Yuan could only detect the effects of the lunar dew rejuvenation pill and not what spiritual ingredients had been used. As for what the radiant pearl that Mystic Moon was talking about, Lin Yuan did not know. It seemed that the radiant pearl was not something that he could come into contact with at his current level. At that moment, the veteran factions and the top factions management generation in the Night Peak Palace were eagerly waiting for the Nyx assembly to begin. At the same time, they were also listening intently to the conversation between the 13 High Lords, not daring to make the slightest sound. Elder Time, who had not said a word since the beginning, suddenly spoke to the other 12 High Lords. Have you heard that the Azure Federation has confirmed the news of the 4th Azure Envoy among the 5 Azure Envoys? Upon hearing Elder Time's words, the Moon Empress, Night-Leaning Moon, Bamboo Monarch, Chef Supreme, and the others frowned slightly. Obviously, they had not heard the news of the Azure Federation confirming the 4th Azure Envoy. However, since Old Man Time had spoken, his words had to be absolutely true, so there was no way he would lie. The Azure Federation and the Radiance Federation were both one of the 3 major federations, and there was a Radiance Blue route between them. There was a lot of material exchange between the 2 federations. Therefore, the news about the 4th Azure Envoy could really be considered big news. The neutral and calm voice on the phone sounded again. Elder Time, don't keep us in suspense. You just went to the Azure Federation not long ago, so you naturally know more about it than we do. Upon hearing that, Elder Time hurriedly said, clearly very respectful to that neutral and calm voice. 10 days ago, one of the 12 5-star Azure families of the Azure Federation awakened 2 beast tattoos at the same time in the younger generation. One of the beast tattoos was from the 5-star Azure family, and the other came from a 4-star family. It is said that the 4th Azure Envoy was previously a woman who was ill. After listening to Elder Time, the neutral and calm voice said, 2 beast patterns perfectly expressed in a person's body without conflict. It's really strange that 2 beast patterns are perfectly expressed in a person's body without conflict. There are really more and more interesting young people. It just so happens that we can announce the news of the Class 6 dimensional rift in a while. As soon as the neutral and calm voice fell, the eyes of the veteran factions and the top factions management generation immediately revealed extreme ecstasy. Chapter 886. As the leaders of the veteran factions and pinnacle factions, they were always thinking about how to develop their clan better and obtain more resources. A clan's military strength, operations, and expansion all required resources to support it. Therefore, apart from the veteran factions and pinnacle factions leaders who had the opportunity to become Radiance Envoys or members of the Radiance Light Knights, the news of the Azure Federation's 4th Azure Envoy had been confirmed. The rest of the people treated it as a piece of news. However, the news of a Class 6 dimensional rift caused the hearts of all the veteran factions and pinnacle factions leaders to beat violently. If Class 1 to Class 5 dimensional rifts were used by dimensional lifeforms to attack the main world, then Spirit Chi professionals could enter the dimensional rift after killing the dimensional lifeforms that surged out. They could search for resources in the dimensional rift and obtain source-type items or even sacred source lifeforms from the dimensional hub. Class 6 dimensional rifts could be defined as the main world's invasion of the dimensional world. After Class 6 dimensional rifts appeared, there wouldn't be as many dimensional lifeforms as Class 1 to Class 5 dimensional rifts. However, the strength of the dimensional lifeforms that surged out was uncertain. Class 6 dimensional rifts were connected to the entire dimensional world. After a Class 6 dimensional rift opened, there would be a dimensional membrane inside the rift. Due to this dimensional membrane, the dimensional lifeforms in the dimensional world wouldn't feel the dimensional rift's suction force and wouldn't be able to see the dimensional rift. However, if they were to accidentally step into the dimensional rift, they would still be teleported to the main world. The strength of the lifeforms in the dimensional world wasn't fixed. There might be Class 1 dimensional lifeforms that were equivalent to Bronze Phase or Class 10 dimensional lifeforms that were equivalent to Creation Breed Phase. There was once a Class 6 dimensional rift in the Radiance Federation that was connected to the Abyss world. When the Class 6 dimensional rift opened, there happened to be two Class 10 demons that were equivalent to creation breed phase fighting. Fortunately, the Class 6 dimensional rift that connected to the Abyss world opened in the desolate Scorching Sun Desert. The Scorching Sun Desert was tens of thousands of kilometers away from the nearest inhabited city, Rolling Rock City. However, the battle between the two Class 10 demons still affected Rolling Rock City, which was tens of thousands of kilometers away. It even affected the Scorching Sun Desert's terrain. This caused the temperature of the Scorching Desert to soar. The entire central region was roasted into flowing lava. In the end, the Spirit Guard's Chief Guard Yi had personally arrived and taken in the two Class 10 demons that were equivalent to creation breed phase. Subsequently, Chief Guard Knight dispatched 20 envoys to seal the Class 6 dimensional rift, while Chief Guard Knight personally led a team into the Abyss world. After killing all the demons within thousands of kilometers of the Abyss world's Class 6 dimensional rift, he ordered 20 guard envoys to station themselves within the Class 6 dimensional rift. They would prevent the abyssal demons from invading the origin world from the inside. Risks often coexisted with benefits. Class 6 dimensional rifts might be accompanied by unpredictable dangers, but compared to the rewards, these risks were nothing. A dimensional world connected to a Class 6 dimensional rift was a huge treasure trove. The resources in a dimensional world were far more abundant than those in the Abyss dimensional rifts. If one could go through a Class 6 dimensional rift to harvest resources in a dimensional world, it would be much easier. That way he would be able to earn a lot of money very quickly, allowing his faction to develop to a higher level. Due to the special characteristics of Class 6 dimensional rifts, their existence was like a second world that was connected to the Radiance continent. One could establish a faction through the Class 6 dimensional rift and develop in the dimensional world. The Origin World's faction and the Dimensional Rift's faction would form a connection and continuously move the dimensional world's resources into the Origin World. Of course, in order to do so, one must have sufficient strength to support it. Furthermore, this Class 6 dimensional rift was an Abyss dimensional rift, and the abyssal demon's strength was not to be trifled with. Since the Class 6 Abyss dimensional rift was connected to the entire dimensional world, if a Class 6 Abyss dimensional rift was opened in the Federation of other continents, other Federation experts would also be able to enter the Abyss world through the Class 6 Abyss dimensional rift. It could be said that the Class 6 dimensional rift had given the various major federations a chance to compete for hegemony on the same stage. The veteran factions and the pinnacle factions management generation started to get excited. Based on Her Majesty's words, could it be that the Class 6 Abyss dimensional rift in the rock flow desert that had been sealed for nearly a decade was going to be opened to the public? If that was the case, it was simply great news. Zhou Ming, the left administrator, arrived at the inner palace of Night Dawn Palace. He quickly walked to Night Leaning Moon's ear and whispered a few words before standing behind her with his hands behind his back. At that moment, the Night Dawn Palace's bell rang again. Upon hearing the bell, Night Leaning Moon stood up and said, "It's time for the Nyx Assembly's official meeting. It's time for the Nyx Assembly's official meeting. Let's get ready to start the official meeting." As soon as Night Leaning Moon's voice fell, the spiritual power in her body suddenly circulated. The tide-like spiritual power poured into the dark crystal floor of Night Dawn Palace's inner palace. At the same time, an aura that was like the eternal night gushed out of Night Leaning Moon's body. Immediately after, the Veteran Factions Management Generation and the Pinnacle Factions Management Generation, as well as the Outer Palace's Youth Generation, suddenly realized that the walls and floor were rapidly changing shape as they were disassembled and pieced together. The entire Night Dawn Palace was like a mechanical palace that was being disassembled and pieced together. In just a moment, the outer palace and inner palace of Night Dawn Palace had fused together to form a giant auditorium. 13 chairs were placed around the auditorium, encircling the entire auditorium. Behind each chair there were a few more seats. These seats were slightly shorter than the 13 chairs. The number of seats behind each chair was different. Some had more, some had fewer, and some didn't even have seats behind them. It was obvious that the number of seats had been carefully chosen. Many chairs had also appeared in the auditorium's center. These chairs were slightly shorter than the seats behind the 13 chairs. There was a gap behind each chair which was just enough for one or two people to stand in. In front of these chairs was a huge ceremonial platform. The design of the ceremonial platform was simple and crude, and it was completely inlaid with law crystals. The entire auditorium was burning with the top-notch exceptional flame, Sun's sacred flame. The changes in Night Dawn Palace's outer palace stunned the veteran factions management generation and the pinnacle factions management generation and the younger generation. The first was even more shocking. End of this chapter. Chapter 887. The Bamboo Monarch looked at the auditorium that was formed by the fusion of the outer and inner palaces. Qingyue, your ingenuity as a 5-star spirit craftsman is truly superb. Every time I see you, I want to invite you to my purple bamboo forest to transform my Xianxia pavilion. Night Leaning Moon glanced at the Bamboo Monarch with a strange expression. Isn't your residence in the purple bamboo forest called Purple Bamboo Pavilion? When did it change its name to Xianxia Pavilion? The Bamboo Monarch coughed and could not help but curse in his heart. With Night Leaning Moon's EQ, it's no wonder the Moon Empress didn't choose her as one of the Moon Envoys. She's just showing off her love and ingratiating herself with the beauty standing behind her. Night Leaning Moon can't even see this. Of course, the Bamboo Monarch would not say this out loud. If he did, he was afraid that Night Leaning Moon would immediately attack him. At that moment, those veteran factions and pinnacle factions management generation standing behind Night Leaning Moon suddenly realized that Chief Guard Yi was actually a Class 5 spirit craftsman. This was the first time they had heard of this news. There were far more Class 5 spirit craftsmen in the Radiance Federation than Class 5 creation masters. After a rough calculation, there should be at least 100 pinnacle Class 4 creation masters. They had also looked for Class 5 creation masters to help them produce items. However, ordinary Class 5 spirit craftsmen definitely did not have the ability to use ingenious means to build the entire palace like Chief Guard Yi. Spirit craftsmen were the same as creation masters. After reaching Class 5, there were no grades. However, just by looking at this Night Independence Palace, it was obvious that Chief Guard Yi's spirit craftsman strength was definitely far superior to ordinary Class 5 spirit craftsmen. At that moment, the aura that was like the eternal night suddenly shrank, and the majestic aura was withdrawn into Night Leaning Moon's body. At that moment, a mark appeared on the back of the 13 chairs, including those placed in the center of the auditorium. The mark on the 13 chairs was the crown pattern of the 13 majesties, while the mark on the back of the seats in the center area represented the various veteran factions and pinnacle factions' family imprints. As the organizer of the Nyx Assembly, Night Leaning Moon appeared on the stage in a flash and said in a cold voice, "Everyone, the Nyx Assembly's main meeting has begun. Everyone, the main meeting of the Nyx Assembly has begun. Take your seats." After saying that, Night Leaning Moon flashed to her seat again. Cicada Cry first placed the phone in his hand on the chair it belonged to, and then returned to his own chair in a flash. As the 13 majesties took their seats, the leaders of the veteran forces and the top forces also took their seats according to the marks on the back of the chairs in the central area. The younger generation came to stand behind their elders. Zhongzhe, Gulang, Li Zhonglin, Zhang Yingying, Xiachen, Wang Fuxiang, and the others sat on the seats reserved for them. It didn't take long for him to finish sitting down. Song Yu, the left minister, and Zhu Ming stood behind the chairs, standing ramrod straight like guards. At this moment, the leaders of the peak and veteran forces, as well as the youngsters standing behind their elders, keenly noticed that the seats reserved behind the other High Lords were already occupied. Only the seats behind Chief Guard Yi and the Moon Empress were empty. At that moment, only Lu Jia, who had just won the Martial Duel Championship, and Lin Yuan, who had won the Civil and Martial Duel Championship, were not present in the entire Nyx Assembly. This made many people who had guessed Lin Yuan's identity confirm his identity. It also made those who didn't know Lin Yuan's identity suddenly have a shocking guess. At this moment, 4 people walked out from the only corridor in the entire auditorium. When they saw these 4 people, not only were the leaders of the veteran forces and the top forces stunned, but even the 11 majesties apart from the Moon Empress and Chief Guard Yi were also stunned. Their eyes scanned the Moon Empress and Night Leaning Moon, as well as a youth walking at the front of the corridor. At that moment, a voice suddenly echoed in the central area. "Damn, why is Lin Yuan wearing the majesties?" The majesties. Before Gao Feng could finish speaking, he immediately realized that he had said something wrong. Gao Feng secretly glanced forward and found that his father was indeed glaring at him. Gao Pei's glare immediately made Gao Feng shiver. However, Gao Feng immediately noticed that the corners of his father's mouth were curling up from time to time, and his cheeks were also twitching slightly. It was as though his face was stiff from smiling. Gao Feng thought to himself, "Why is my father's expression so strange?" Gao Feng was just about to ask his father what was wrong when he realized that he was being lifted up by a ball of gentle spiritual power that was like a cool breeze. By the time Gao Feng came back to his senses, he found himself standing in front of a man with eyes full of smiles. This man was wearing a simple and elegant green majesties that were covered with a thin layer of cicada wing patterns. The cicada wing patterns overlapped and had an indescribable elegance. The two sides of the majesties were woven with an unknown crystalline silk thread to form two towering giant trees. The giant trees were embroidered with silver silk beads and a few cicadas. Just looking at these cicadas, Gao Feng felt his heart suddenly calm down, and his ears seemed to be ringing with the clear chirping of Zen insects. However, Gao Feng immediately reacted. Wasn't this person in front of him one of the 13 majesties who stayed in the imperial court for a long time, His Majesty Cicada Cry? Gao Feng was shocked and didn't know why His Majesty Cicada Cry called him in front of him. Could it be that His Majesty Cicada Cry was unhappy because of his careless mouth? Was His Majesty Cicada Cry going to personally punish him? Gao Feng remembered his father saying that among the 13 majesties, His Majesty Cicada Cry was always smiling and looked the easiest to approach. However, in reality His Majesty Cicada Cry was the most difficult to approach among the 13 majesties. The 13 majesties always had their own responsibilities. For example, Bureau Chief Yi was in charge of the Spirit Guard, and Spacetime Elder was in charge of ostrich logistics. Every majesty had a special right and a specific duty. His Majesty Cicada Cry's responsibility was to be the city lord of the 36 big cities in the imperial court. It could be said that the city lords of the 36 big cities were His Majesty Cicada Cry's subordinates. One word from His Majesty Cicada Cry could decide the appointment or dismissal of the city lords. Moreover, the veteran forces and top forces were deeply rooted in the 36 major cities. Therefore, no veteran or top force dared to not respect His Majesty Cicada Cry, who indirectly ruled the 36 big cities. Just as Gao Feng was feeling nervous, he heard His Majesty Cicada Cry in front of him speak softly. "Little guy, I know you're called Gao Feng. Don't be nervous." Then, Gao Feng saw His Majesty Cicada Cry in front of him stand up and speak to Bureau Chief Yi in a clear voice. "Bureau Chief Yi, give this seat to this seat's disciple. Your disciples are all sitting, I can't let this seat's disciple stand." The second was even more. End of this chapter. Chapter 888. Cicada Cry's words made Gao Feng's expression immediately turn sluggish. Gao Feng subconsciously stretched out his left pinky to pick his ear, thinking that he had heard wrongly. However, when he thought that he was standing in front of Cicada Cry, it was too rude to reach out and pick his ear. Cicada Cry saw Gao Feng's action and reached out to touch Gao Feng's slightly wrinkled collar. "What? You're not willing to be my disciple?" Gao Feng immediately woke up from his sluggish state. Gao Feng was not stupid. He would not refuse Cicada Cry's public acceptance of a disciple even if he was beaten to death. However, Gao Feng did not understand why Cicada Cry would want to accept him as a disciple. In short, it was impossible for Cicada Cry to accept him as a disciple because of his father. Even his grandfather did not have such great capabilities. The gears in Gao Feng's head began to spin, and he immediately realized that the reason why His Holiness Cicada Cry had accepted him as a disciple was probably because of the strength he had displayed in the combat arena. Only this explanation could explain it clearly. As for his contracted breeze hibiscus and spirit spring lily, they would definitely not be favored by His Majesty Cicada Cry. The only thing that Cicada Cry had taken a fancy to was the yellow spring lily, which he had always treated as a trump card and had not even told his father. When Gao Feng had seen the yellow spring lily, he had immediately decided to use resources like the island whale and the elemental shellfish to exchange for it. This was enough to prove the yellow spring lily's preciousness. Moreover, when Gao Feng had promoted the yellow spring lily to a fantasy breed, he had been exceptionally surprised to see the exclusive skill. At the thought of this, Gao Feng could not help but feel grateful to Lin Yuan. Although he had exchanged for the yellow spring lily with resources during the transaction, If Lin Yuan had not taken it out, he would not have had such a chance today. It could be said that Lin Yuan had unknowingly given him a life-changing chance. It could be said that Lin Yuan had imperceptibly given him a life-changing chance. Lin Yuan was really his benefactor. While Gao Feng was thinking in his mind, he did not speak carelessly and hurriedly nodded. Yes, I'm willing. Night-leaning Moon frowned slightly when she heard Cicada Cry's words, and her face faintly revealed a displeased expression. This Nix conference was a grand event for her and Moon Sai to announce their disciples. Cicada Cry's sudden acceptance of Gao Feng as a disciple was a little too much in Night-leaning Moon's opinion. Night-leaning Moon knew that Cicada Cry intended to take Gao Feng as his disciple, and thought that Cicada Cry would contact the Gao family in private after the Great Nix Assembly ended. He did not expect Cicada Cry to announce Gao Feng's identity in such a way. However, even though Night-leaning Moon was displeased, she still poured her spiritual energy into her feet. The ground behind Cicada's chair changed and a chair grew out of the ground. Cicada Cry pulled Gao Feng to sit on the chair that suddenly grew out, and then returned to his own chair. He had only just accepted Gao Feng as his disciple, yet he was already acting so meticulously. Iron Prison could not help but feel envious when he saw Cicada Cry accepting disciples. However, the performance of the younger generation in the martial arena was really not that good. The civil and martial duels did not give the younger generation, apart from Lin Yuan and Zhong Zhe, a chance to display their combat strength. After looking around, apart from Lin Yuan, Zhong Zhe and Lu Jia, Iron Prison did not fancy anyone else. Du Shua might have used his fei to fight with Lu Jia, but Iron Prison had not taken a fancy to Du Shua. He felt that Du Shua's contracted fei might be powerful, but it did not form a system and there was nothing eye-catching about it. Gao Feng's mind was still a little dazed as he sat on the chair. However, he was more excited than dazed. Originally, Gao Feng felt that he was very lucky because Lu Jia had obtained second place in the martial arena. Now that he had become His Holiness Cicada Cry's disciple, it could no longer be described as just lucky. Gao Pei's face was smiling like a big chrysanthemum, and he straightened his neck and prepared to endure the envious gazes from all directions. However, because Cicada Cry had the intention to accept Gao Feng as a disciple, the veteran factions and the top factions management generation were already aware of it. After the younger generation was done being jealous of Gao Feng, their eyes firmly landed on the youth and youth that were striding over on the long corridor. When they saw the youth and youth's attire, they could not help but feel a shock that reached the depths of their souls. The youth and youth were wearing the same imperial robes as the Moon Empress and Chief Guard Yi. After a slight separation, they realized that the youth and youth's imperial robes were different from the Moon Empress and Chief Guard Ye's imperial robes. Although Lu Jia, who had changed into the imperial robes, was still wearing the Spirit Guard's standard mask, Lu Jia and Lin Yuan's aura were very outstanding. The gorgeous and dignified imperial robes paired with the two elegant young masters made it hard for people not to look at them. However, be it the veteran factions management generation or the younger generation, none of them dared to imagine how much the Moon Empress and Chief Guard Yi doted on their disciples. That was why they would make such clothes according to their own imperial robes. Even if other His Holiness accepted disciples, they had never heard of any His Holiness replicating their imperial robes for their juniors to wear. When the youth and youth walked out of the long corridor with the imperial robes, they suddenly gave off a feeling that they were unreachable and distant. The Moon Empress and Night-leaning Moon circulated the spiritual power in their bodies at the same time, and two masses of spiritual power simultaneously lifted Lin Yuan and Lu Jia to their sides. The Moon Empress reached out her hand to help Lin Yuan adjust the pearl collar on his neck and said, "I personally sewed this robe 2 months ago. This dress was personally sewn by me 2 months ago. Now that I look at it, it suits you quite well. However, you are only 19 years old. You can still grow taller. When you grow taller, I will help you change it." Lin Yuan looked at the Moon Empress and suddenly felt that this seemingly heavy but abnormally light lunar imperial robe had an indescribable warmth. Lin Yuan revealed a bright smile and said, "Master, I will work hard to grow taller." Upon hearing that, the Moon Empress suddenly felt that Lin Yuan, who had always been mature, had a trace of childishness. The Moon Empress cherished Lin Yuan's rare childishness and unconsciously revealed a warm smile. The Moon Empress cherished Lin Yuan's rare childishness very much and unconsciously revealed a warm smile. When everyone saw the interaction between the Moon Empress and Lin Yuan, their jaws almost dropped to the ground. Just by looking at the lunar imperial robe that Lin Yuan was wearing, it was enough to see how much the Moon Empress doted on him. However, they did not expect the usually cold Moon Empress to have such a gentle side in front of Lin Yuan. At that moment, everyone present was waiting for the official start of the Nix assembly. However, there was a dumbfounded person standing behind an empty chair. This person was Zheng Kaiyuan. As one of the 3 veteran factions in Indigo Azure City, the Zheng family was not qualified to participate in a grand event like the Nix assembly. Zheng Kaiyuan had appeared at the Nix assembly because his master Miao Qi had brought him along. Since something had happened to Miao Zhuo, Zheng Kaiyuan had wanted to use the Nix assembly's official start to inform his master Miao Zhi. However, Zheng Kaiyuan realized that not only had Miao Zhuo been thrown out by Zhuo Ming, but even his master Miao Qi was no longer in the Nix assembly. Zheng Kaiyuan had originally been happy that he had mixed into Lin Yuan's circle. However, there was only one question in Zheng Kaiyuan's mind now. Where had his master gone? The anesthetic effect had worn off today and it was very painful. He had been holed up in bed with his cell phone for the entire day. Sob, sob, sob. Button was not good at using a cell phone to type word by word. It was still more convenient to type on a computer. His thoughts kept getting interrupted in the ward, so he might not write very well. He had already tried his best to correct it. Tomorrow I will continue to use my cell phone to type. I hope to go home early. Good night, everyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 889. As a direct descendant of a veteran faction, Zheng Kaiyuan was not a fool. Moreover, Zheng Kaiyuan had been with Miao Qi for so many years and had received resources from top-notch factions. He had received the same education as the direct descendants of top-notch factions. His horizons had always been higher than those of veteran factions. Based on the current situation, Zheng Kaiyuan quickly deduced that his master, Miao Qi, must have encountered some trouble in Yeyang Palace. It was likely that he had offended someone he could not afford to offend and was forced to leave Yeyang Palace. If Miao Qi had left Yeyang Palace because of something, it was impossible for him not to tell him before leaving. However, Zheng Kaiyuan could not figure out what his master Miao Qi had encountered in Yeyang Palace no matter how hard he thought about it. The seats in the core area of the auditorium were not too far apart. Miao Zhuo was standing in the area where the Miao family's beast creation garden was located. The area next to it was the top-notch faction, the 4-legged beast region. Normally, Zheng Kaiyuan would not dare to rashly ask the Fong family's elders about the top-notch faction, the 4-legged beast region. Even though he was standing in the beast creation garden, Zheng Kaiyuan still knew that his surname was Zheng and not Miao. However, when he thought about how he was standing in the circle of the Moon Empress, Chief Guard Yi, Bamboo Monarch and Chef Supreme's disciples, Zheng Kaiyuan could not help but muster up his courage. Zheng Kaiyuan took 2 steps toward the old man of the Fong family and coughed lightly. Senior Fong, I wonder where my master Miao Qi has gone? Zheng Kaiyuan purposely emphasized the word, master, as if to emphasize his identity. The current family head of the 4-legged beast region, Fong Zhan, was rather curious when he saw a hesitant young man walking toward him. As Zheng Kaiyuan had been facing Fong Zhan from the side, Fong Zhan did not see the family mark on Zheng Kaiyuan's collar. Moreover, Zheng Kaiyuan's spirit chi clothes were not like Miao Zhuo's iconic 100-beast new Miao suit, so he could be recognized at a glance. Therefore Fong Zhan did not immediately recognize Zheng Kaiyuan. However, when Fong Zhan heard Zheng Kaiyuan reveal his identity, he looked at Zheng Kaiyuan with a strange expression. Fong Zhan had just heard from his grandson Fong He about the trouble Miao Zhuo had caused in the outer palace of Yeyang Palace. This made Fong Zhan reconsider whether to cooperate with the Miao family. On the other hand, he couldn't help but vent his anger on the Miao family's Beast Creation Institute. His grandson had almost been punished by the left custodian Zhuo Ming because of Miao Zhuo's involvement. It was all thanks to the magnanimity of Bureau Chief Ye's disciple. The Miao family's Beast Creation Gardens, old and young, were really troublemakers. Just as Fong Zhan was about to reprimand Zheng Kaiyuan, he heard Fong He bend over and whisper something into his ear. These words caused Fong Zhan's gaze to change as he looked at Zheng Kaiyuan, and his tone became much more polite. Your master, Miao Qi, is wearing a spirit chi outfit that coincides with the bamboo monarch's crown pattern, which is equivalent to offending the bamboo monarch. I was just chased out of the Great Nix assembly by the right minister in the inner palace. As for the specific details, Feng Zhan didn't dare to go into detail. After living for so long, Feng Zhan understood the principle that trouble came from the mouth. This matter was related to the bamboo monarch's private affairs, so it would be wrong to say it. After carefully scrutinizing Zheng Kaiyuan for a while, Feng Zhan truly didn't find anything special about him. If there was really anything special about him, Zheng Kaiyuan should have participated in the civil, martial or both civil and martial competitions. Feng Zhan couldn't see what qualifications this veteran faction's disciple had to stand in that circle. Upon hearing Feng Zhan's words, Zheng Kaiyuan was dumbstruck. He felt that the surrounding air had turned cold. Not only had Miao Zhuo offended the Moon Empress disciple, but he had also been chased out by her disciple, whose soul and talent had been damaged. Even his own master Miao Qi had offended the bamboo monarch because of the crown pattern. It must be known that offending the High Holiness was a very disrespectful act. His master, Miao Qi's status in the Beast Creation Garden might plummet because of this matter. By then he would not be able to enjoy his current treatment. At the thought of this, Miao Zhuo felt his legs go weak and his entire body was on the verge of collapsing. At that moment, Zheng Kaiyuan suddenly heard Feng Zhan speak. I heard that you have a personal relationship with the High Holiness disciple. If you want to help your master, you can go and plead with the High Holiness disciple. I'm afraid old man Miao is worrying about how to get on the High Holiness's good side to express his apology. When Zheng Kaiyuan heard Feng Zhan's words, his tottering body suddenly straightened, and his legs were filled with strength. It could be said that Feng Zhan's words had opened the door to a new world for Zheng Kaiyuan. Zheng Kaiyuan was still a little confused when Lin Yuan had called him over. He did not understand why Lin Yuan had been so enthusiastic toward him. After he had joined that small group, he had not dared to speak to the other High Holiness disciple and was not familiar with the bamboo monarch's disciple, Gu Lang. Zheng Kaiyuan was not naive enough to think that his pleading would be useful. However, everyone had seen Lin Yuan's attitude toward him earlier. Lin Yuan had also revealed his identity as the Moon Empress disciple. He could use Lin Yuan's tiger skin, and not only would he not be implicated when he returned, but he might even receive a meeting with his grandfather who had always disliked him. He might even receive an audience with his grandfather who had always disliked him. At that time his status in the Miao family would definitely rise as well. Even without Miao Qi he would definitely be doing well. Lin Yuan had just left his phone number, and he could indeed help the Miao family contact Lin Yuan. At that thought, Zheng Kaiyuan looked at the chair engraved with the Miao family's mark on the back of the chair and could not help but have an ambition. While hesitating, his ambition won over his timidity. Zheng Kaiyuan walked to the chair and sat down. Lin Yuan had been watching Zheng Kaiyuan's actions, and his fingers gently tapped on the chair's armrest. Zheng Kaiyuan is really good bait. Lin Yuan had been thinking about how to guide Zheng Kaiyuan a second time, but it seemed that it was no longer necessary. Next, Lin Yuan only needed to spread the net and wait for Zheng Kaiyuan, the good bait, to lure the big fish that was the Miao family over. The Nix assembly was ongoing, and Lin Yuan had never liked such grand and restrained occasions. Lin Yuan sat on the chair and stared at the ceremonial platform inlaid with complete law crystals like a miser. At the same time he constantly appeased the chattering princess in the depths of his soul. The law crystals on the ceremonial platform are not ours, so you can't absorb them later. When the princess heard Lin Yuan's words, she immediately became disappointed. Lin Yuan sensed her disappointment and hurriedly said, "Don't you still have a lot of law origin crystals? Don't you still have a lot of law origin crystals? I remember that you should prefer to absorb law origin crystals than law crystals. I remember that you should prefer to absorb law origin crystals than law crystals." Chapter 890. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, the princess said aggrievedly, "Master, I used to eat law origin crystals every day. Master, I used to eat law origin crystals every day. Isn't it normal for me to want to change my taste? Besides, I'm afraid that if I keep absorbing law origin crystals like this, I'll starve when they're finished." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan immediately knew that the princess had such an idea because she had not eaten for a period of time. Now that she had law origin crystals to eat every day, she began to be wary of danger in times of peace and wanted to save some surplus food. Lin Yuan said to the princess with some amusement, "Don't worry. Even if I can't guarantee that you'll always absorb law origin crystals at this speed, it won't be a problem to have them to eat every day. Also, if you want to eat law crystals in the future, there will be plenty of them." The previous duel with Xianxia had made Lin Yuan clear about the princess' strength, so he planned to spare no effort in nurturing her. Whether it was using the princess dress to inscribe laws to increase his resistance or transforming the complete laws into a world of laws, they could all increase Lin Yuan's strength. Lin Yuan still had a lot of law origin crystals, and he should be able to use them to promote another Myth 3 law into a world of laws. Among the 3 complete Myth 3 laws that Lin Yuan now had, the Ice Flame Law increased his resistance to ice and fire, while the Vicious Poison Law increased his resistance to poison. The Remnant Dream Law increased his resistance to darkness and spiritual energy. Although the Remnant Dream Law was a darkness-type law, it focused on attacking the dreamland. Dream attack was a special kind of spiritual attack. With Genius and the Dark Death World, Lin Yuan no longer needed the Remnant Dream Law to increase his resistance to darkness and spiritual energy. Therefore, even if he had more law origin crystals in the future, he did not intend to promote the Remnant Dream Law into the Remnant Dream World. As for the Vicious Poison Law and the Ice Flame Law, Lin Yuan was a little hesitant. In the battle with Xianxia, the Ice Flame Law had made a great contribution. If it was promoted to the Ice Flame World, then Lin Yuan would no longer need to activate the Jasmine Lily's exclusive skill Life Imprint when facing Xianxia. Lin Yuan himself would no longer be affected by the Burning Sky Centipede's exclusive skill, Fire Fantasy Country. Raising the Vicious Poison Law to Creation Breed could greatly enhance his poison resistance and even give him the chance to be immune to the attacks of Myth Breed Poison-type Phase. Not only were Poison-type Phase able to use Poison-type abilities, but many Plant-type Phase also possessed toxins. He was going to train in the Divine Wood Federation next, so it seemed that it would be more useful to upgrade the Vicious Poison Law to the Vicious Poison World. At the Myth Breed level, Poison-type Phase were becoming increasingly rare. However, Myth Breed Poison-type Phase were extremely powerful, causing many same-grade Phase to tremble in fear. Presumably, after the Vicious Poison rule in the body of the Jade-scaled Sky-swallowing Python advanced into the Vicious Poison World, it would also provide him with a sword technique that focused on poison attacks. During the battle just now, Lin Yuan had not summoned any of Black's Phase, so Black's identity had not been exposed. Lin Yuan had imperceptibly separated his combat ability. In Lin Yuan's opinion, this kind of separation was beneficial. Black's identity could allow him to continue to hone his Fey combat cooperation on Star Web and participate in the Radiance 100 sequence test with this identity. With the Radiant Light Metal, Lin Yuan was a big step ahead of others on the Radiance Envoy path. It would not be too late to combine his 2 identities when the Radiance Envoys were officially selected 2 years later. Suddenly, Mystic Moon's voice pulled Lin Yuan back from his thoughts. "Your Highness, although the Nyx Assembly's main theme has already begun, it shouldn't end in less than 2 hours. If Your Highness feels bored, I have some snacks here to help you pass the time." After saying that, Xianyu waved her hand and took out several glass jars. These glass jars contained all sorts of diamond-rank spirit fruits. These diamond-rank spirit fruits had been soaked in the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar after they were dried. After absorbing a sufficient amount of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar, the dried fruits became crystal clear and looked quite appetizing. However, Lin Yuan hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Don't worry. I've already eaten a lot before the civil and martial duels started. I'm not hungry at all now." Perhaps due to the influence of his previous life, Lin Yuan felt that it was a little strange to eat in such an occasion. When Mystic Moon saw that Lin Yuan wasn't eating, she handed the jars in her hand to Cold Moon. Cold Moon took one of the jars and touched it with her fingertip. An ice needle immediately formed on her fingernail. Cold Moon used the ice needle to prick the candied fruit in the jar and put it in her mouth before eating it with relish. Lin Yuan looked toward the center of the auditorium and found that Night Leaning Moon was standing on the stage again at some point in time. The veteran factions and the top factions management generation had a hint of eagerness, excitement in their eyes. Lin Yuan thought that these veteran factions and the top factions management generation should know what the main meeting was about. Otherwise they wouldn't be so excited. Just as Lin Yuan was guessing, he heard Night Leaning Moon's clear voice. Apart from the Moon Empress and I accepting a disciple and wanting to see the strength of the younger generation, there is another important matter for the Nyx Assembly to be held this time. The Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift in the Burning Flame Desert has been reinforced and stabilized at a great cost. The Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift in the Burning Desert has now been refined into a permanent portal that connects to the Abyss world. Upon hearing Night Leaning Moon's words, the veteran factions and the top factions management generation's eyes became even more fervent. Night Leaning Moon's words also startled Lin Yuan slightly. Previously, Lin Yuan had only heard of Class 1 to Class 5 dimensional rifts. This was the first time he had heard of a Class 6 dimensional rift. When the Moon Empress saw Lin Yuan's doubtful expression, she explained to him. After the Moon Empress explanation, Lin Yuan immediately knew what exactly was going on with a Class 6 dimensional rift. It turned out that once a dimensional rift reached Class 6, it would become a portal that connected the origin world to another dimensional world. In this case, as long as the origin world had enough strength, it could continuously mine the dimensional world's resources. This was a good thing for the origin world. In Lin Yuan's opinion, the fact that the Class 6 dimensional rift in the Radiance Federation's territory was an abyss dimensional rift should be considered lucky. Among the 5 dimensional worlds that were connected to the 5 major dimensional rifts, the water dimensional world was the hardest to mine. Chapter 891. Even if spirit chi professionals could rely on some special phase to breathe underwater, this underwater breathing ability was ultimately limited. The water world was filled with boundless seawater and massive water world dimensional lifeforms that swam in the seawater. Spirit chi professionals could not go too far in the water world. Without the oxygen supply, even the strongest spirit chi professional would be permanently left in the water world. The bodies of the water world dimensional lifeforms were trash to spirit chi professionals and had no value at all. If the bodies of the water world dimensional lifeforms were taken out of the water world, it would instead become the burden of the spirit chi professionals. When the bodies of the water world dimensional lifeforms were exposed to the air, the stench that would erupt from them was not something that ordinary people could tolerate. As for the underground world, it was much stronger than the water world. After all, the underground world was rich in a large number of metallic spiritual materials, which could be used to manufacture all kinds of items and also to nurture phase. It could be said that the metallic spiritual materials produced in the underground world were extremely useful to spirit chi professionals. However, the exploration of the underground world was not much more difficult than the exploration of the water world. The underground environment was really not very friendly to spirit chi professionals. In order to explore the underground world, one would need to contract a fae that could illuminate, which was equivalent to a waste of talent for many people. Moreover, the dangers in the underground world were not only limited to dimensional life forms, but also often accompanied by earthquakes and landslides. Once there were earthquakes and landslides, spirit chi professionals exploring the depths of the underground world would have almost no chance of survival. The abyss world and the alien insect world were much less dangerous than the water world and the underground world. If the two were to be compared in detail, the abyss world was more suitable for spirit chi professionals to develop inside. Although the abyss demons were individually strong, they won in numbers. Spirit chi professional squads could defeat the abyss demons one by one, but even if they could easily kill a single unit in the face of a sea of alien insects, the endless sea of insects could easily make people lose their fighting spirit. The abyss world could produce strange flames, which were a necessary resource for many lifestyle class spirit chi professionals. A large number of strange flames from the abyss world into the main world could greatly promote the development of lifestyle class spirit chi professionals. Of course, the alien insect world also had some rare resources that were comparable to strange flames. However, the value of the alien insect body was far lower than that of the abyss demon's body. The abyss demon's body could be decomposed into some spiritual materials, which were rather useful to creation masters. This made abyssal demons the dimensional creatures with the highest average value among all the dimensional creatures. However, in his opinion, the most suitable dimensional world for human exploration was still the swamp world, which had always been relatively rare. The environment of the swamp world was no different from that of the main world. Although the swamp world was called the swamp world, the area of the swamp dimensional world was less than 60%. The remaining 40% was all land. Compared to the main world, the swamp world was equivalent to the main world's land being broken up and divided into small islands scattered across the sea. After that, he would turn the seas of the origin world into swamps. The life forms in the swamp world basically had amphibious life forms, but the swamp contained a large amount of earth elements. When spirit chi professionals arrived in the swamp world, they could use earth-type phase to extract the earth elements from the swamp. With a large amount of pure earth elemental essence, the broken pieces of land were connected together to form a large continent. Although the swamp world was humid, it was very suitable for raising amphibious and reptilian phase, insect species phase and plant species phase that liked it. Although most of the dimensional life forms in the swamp dimensional rift were comparable in value to the water world dimensional life forms, a small number of swamp dimensional life forms like Medusa were shockingly valuable. Just as Lin Yuan was pondering, Night Leaning Moon, who was standing on the ceremonial platform, spoke again. The Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift in the Burning Flame Desert can now be opened to the veteran factions and pinnacle factions. However, the resources needed to maintain the opening of the Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift will need to be jointly provided by all the major factions that are preparing to enter the Abyss world through the Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift. Factions that enter the Abyss world through the Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift will have to pay 10 mid-grade strange flames a day. When Night Leaning Moon finished speaking, Lin Yuan could clearly see the fanatical faces of the leaders of the top factions and veteran factions present, filled with determination to win. They were obviously planning to develop in the Abyss world through the Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift. Compared to the development gains in the Abyss world, the price of 10 mid-level exceptional flames a day was almost negligible. Based on this calculation, the price for a faction to develop in the Abyss world for a month was only 300 mid-level exceptional flames. 300 mid-level exceptional flames might seem like a lot, but as long as a faction had enough manpower, it was very easy to find them in the Abyss world, which was full of exceptional flames. The Radiance Federation's major factions had now developed to a flourishing level. If they continued to develop, it would inevitably increase the friction between the major factions due to the benefits. The opening of the Abyss world was tantamount to giving the various flourishing factions another platform to seek development. The Abyss world was much larger than the main world. Just as Lin Yuan was thinking about whether Sky City should also develop in the Abyss world, Genius, which was connected to Lin Yuan's spiritual energy, spoke to him through spiritual energy. Lin Yuan, your cell phone in the Spirit Lock spatial zone has been ringing for 5 minutes. There have been 7 or 8 phone calls in total. Is there something urgent? Lin Yuan hurriedly summoned his cell phone out of the Spirit Lock spatial zone. When he looked at the caller ID, he realized that these calls were from the Mother of Bloodbath. At that moment, Lin Yuan did not want to pick up the call, but when he saw that the caller was the Mother of Bloodbath, his pupils shrank. A bad premonition suddenly rose in his heart. The Mother of Bloodbath had previously seen him and Lu Jie participate in the Dark Knight Assembly, so it would definitely not look for him now. Moreover, this was the time when Endless Summer could become a creation breed at any time. With that thought in mind, Lin Yuan hurriedly picked up the call. If a myth breed Fae wanted to transform into a creation breed Fae, they needed to go through the creation tribulation, which was not a joke. Lin Yuan took the phone and heard the Mother of Bloodbath, who had always been calm on the other end of the line, actually crying. Lin Yuan, Big Sister Xia, is now in the wilderness 3,000 kilometers away from the royal capital, preparing to endure the creation tribulation. Although Big Sister Xia used law crystals that contain pure power of law to strengthen the Enlightenment Law, the Enlightenment Law's improvement is far more solid than other myth breed Faes. However, Big Sister Xia was seriously injured when the first creation tribulation struck. I'm afraid she won't be able to withstand the next 2. Chapter 892. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan clenched his fists tightly with an anxious expression on his face. He sighed inwardly. I didn't expect that I would really guess correctly. He had personally seen several myth breed Faes undergo the world cleansing. Each time they did so, it was equivalent to entering the gates of hell. They had to take a trip to the gates of hell. However, the danger of the calamity of creation was far from what the world cleansing could compare to. If the world cleansing was said to be a trip to the gates of hell, then the calamity of creation was to forcefully break through the 18 levels of hell. It was precisely because of the difficulty and danger of the calamity of creation that creation breed phase were so rare. After decades of accumulation, many pinnacle emperor-class experts could already let their contracted phase break through to the level of creation breed. However, the fundamental reason why these pinnacle emperor-class experts were reluctant to let their phase experience the calamity of creation was that they were afraid of it. Even if the phase reached the level, they still did not dare to attack the calamity of creation. Not all emperor-class experts could withstand the risk of their contracted phase being annihilated under the calamity of creation. Even those pinnacle emperor-class experts who were seeking to break through would pay a huge price to ask an emperor-class expert with a creation breed fae to help them evolve into a creation breed. Borrowing the emperor-class expert's power to help the fae endure the calamity of creation. Even with the help of an emperor-class expert, there was no guarantee that the fae would be safe during the process of enduring the calamity of creation and becoming a creation breed. On this path to becoming a creation breed, there would always be myth breed phase that perished. The level of life evolution had always been distributed in a pyramid shape. Low-level life forms always had to pay the price of their lives if they wanted to climb to a higher level. Nature's iron law ensured that there would always be so many life forms at the top of the pyramid. New life and death constantly created the balance of life. Especially when Lin Yuan was having a question-and-answer session with the Moon Empress, she had already explained the relevant knowledge of creation breed phase to him in detail. The Moon Empress emphasized the part about the calamity of creation to Lin Yuan. If the world cleansing was a tempering of phase by the world, then phase that had undergone the world cleansing would deepen their mastery of their own laws. After the world cleansing, the world grace would also allow the phase mastery of laws to be greatly enhanced. Then, the calamity of creation used the power to create a world to shatter the complete laws in a pinnacle myth 3 fae. After 3 consecutive calamity of creation slashes, these shattered homologous laws formed a subtle connection. The cognate rules that formed a subtle connection with each other formed a world of rules. Therefore, the tribulation of creation had to endure the pain of the laws being shattered from the very beginning. This suffering might allow them to seek transformation and welcome a new life, but the power of law was ultimately the foundation of a myth breed fae. In addition, they had to endure the calamity of creation twice in a row when the laws were shattered. Even a highly talented fae would not be able to endure it. After the 3 attacks of the tribulation of world creation, the Genesis earth veins would descend like the grace of heaven and earth. If he could survive the 3 attacks of the calamity of creation and fuse the creation earth vein into the world of laws, in that case, even if the original laws were severely damaged by the creation calamity, they would be able to recover under the nourishment of the creation terra. At that moment, the mother of bloodbath's call was really difficult for him. If it was related to the need for resources like law crystals that contained pure law power, Lin Yuan could easily take them out. Even if Lin Yuan could not take them out, he could use the resources at hand to think of a way. But now that it was related to the calamity of creation, only sufficient strength could ensure that endless summer could safely survive. Therefore, facing such a situation, Lin Yuan could only choose to seek help from his master, the Moon Empress. Lin Yuan had always wanted to rely on his own efforts to go further along the way. However, this persistence was far less important than endless summer's life in Lin Yuan's opinion. Lin Yuan hurriedly comforted the mother of Bloodbath on the other end of the phone. "Mother of Bloodbath, don't be anxious. I gave you a few ethereal jellyfish tentacles previously. Do you still have them with you?" Upon hearing that, the mother of Bloodbath hurriedly replied with a sobbing voice, "Yes, yes. I've been keeping those ethereal jellyfish tentacles in the diamond face storage box." While speaking, the mother of Bloodbath had already taken out the 3 ethereal jellyfish tentacles that Lin Yuan had reserved for it from the red crystal cluster ear-shaped diamond face storage box on its ear. When Lin Yuan heard that the mother of Bloodbath had the ethereal jellyfish tentacles, he immediately felt relieved. The mother of Bloodbath had just said that he and Endless Summer were in the wilderness 3,000 meters away from the royal capital. Without the ethereal jellyfish's tentacles, even if he sought the Moon Empress help, he would not know where to find the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer. Every attack from the calamity of creation would have a pause of about 30 minutes. Counting from the first call from the mother of Bloodbath, only 8 minutes had passed. That meant there was still a full 22 minutes before the next calamity of creation struck. This time was enough for Lin Yuan to use the ethereal jellyfish's tentacles to go back and forth a few times. Thinking about it, Endless Summer should have been using the law crystals to temper the enlightenment law and felt that she had broken through that barrier, so she did not think too much about it. Wild with joy, she pulled the Mother of Bloodbath to find a desolate place to prepare for the calamity of creation. During this period, Lin Yuan had been looking forward to Endless Summer becoming a creation breed. Endless Summer was also starting to feel anxious after consuming a large number of law crystals and failing to break through that threshold. Lin Yuan sighed. Endless Summer had been so sloppy when breaking through the calamity of creation. It should be related to the invisible pressure he had given her. While pondering, Lin Yuan said to the Mother of Bloodbath, "Just take the tentacle of the ethereal jellyfish with you. I'll think of a way to help you immediately." At this point he recalled the Mother of Bloodbath's sobbing voice and added another sentence. "I'm with Master." Lin Yuan said the latter sentence to reassure the Mother of Bloodbath and to appease it. Sure enough, the sobbing Mother of Bloodbath on the other end of the phone suddenly relaxed. If Lin Yuan and the Moon Empress were together, as long as he asked for her help, Big Sister Xia would definitely be able to survive the creation tribulation safely. However, even if the Mother of Bloodbath's mind was relaxed, its body was not at all relaxed. Just now, when Endless Summer had suffered the first attack of the creation tribulation, the Mother of Bloodbath had helped Endless Summer block part of the attack. The first one was even worse. End of chapter. Chapter 893. Although the Mother of Bloodbath had only intercepted a small part of the first calamity of creation's attack, it still suffered serious internal injuries from the calamity of creation's power. At that moment, the Mother of Bloodbath felt that its internal organs were all tangled together, and it was extremely painful. This kind of pain made it impossible for the Mother of Bloodbath to maintain its human form. The Mother of Bloodbath endured the pain and looked at Endless Summer, whose main body was almost split in half by the calamity of creation, with a distressed expression. Endless Summer's main body was also seriously injured after the Enlightenment Law was split into pieces, but her mind was still clear. Endless Summer's heart was filled with indescribable regret. On one hand, Endless Summer had been blinded by the obsession of becoming a creation breed. She felt that she had not helped Lin Yuan much after becoming his guardian. Instead, Lin Yuan had been constantly investing resources for her. As Sky City's high-end combat power, from the collision with the Zheng family and the Miao family's beast creation garden, Endless Summer knew the benefits of becoming a creation breed for the entire Sky City. As long as she became a creation breed and had the power of an emperor class, Sky City would have the confidence to wrestle with the top factions in terms of martial strength. On the other hand, even if Endless Summer had already overestimated the difficulty and danger of the calamity of creation, she had not personally seen other Fays go through it. She did not expect there to be such a huge difference between the prediction and reality. Compared to her current situation, what made Endless Summer feel the most pain was that her carelessness had also caused the Mother of Bloodbath to be involved. When the Mother of Bloodbath helped him block the creation tribulation's first attack, it was tainted with the creation tribulation's aura. Even if the Mother of Bloodbath ran far away from the creation tribulation cloud above its head at this time, it would not be able to escape. Even if the Mother of Bloodbath had run far away from the calamity of creation, it would still be attacked by the next two calamities of creation because of the aura left behind by the first attack. The Mother of Bloodbath was now only a suzerain/myth 2 Fae and simply could not withstand the impact of the calamity of creation. Endless Summer could not help but be filled with sorrow as she watched the second attack brewing in the calamity of creation. In order to prevent the Enlightenment Law from overflowing into the world, Endless Summer, which was desperately gathering the shattered Enlightenment Law, no longer had the extra power to control the shattered Enlightenment Law to resist the second calamity of creation. Not to mention guiding the power of the second creation calamity to refine the Enlightenment Law that had been split into pieces, allowing the pieces to form a connection with each other. At that moment, Endless Summer saw the Mother of Bloodbath fly in front of her and shout, "Big Sister Xia Lin Yuan is now beside the Moon Empress. He will come over to help in a while. Gather the Enlightenment Law first. Don't let the fragments of the Enlightenment Law dissipate before they form a connection. The calamity of creation's second attack needs nearly 20 minutes to brew. That's enough for Lin Yuan to rush over with the ethereal jellyfish's tentacles. The mother of Bloodbath had just finished speaking, but before Endless Summer could relax, a sudden change occurred. A beam of dark brown energy shot out from the ground with the force of lightning, striking the Genesis Tribulation cloud in the sky. Then a brownish-black worm covered in dense burrs drilled out of the ground. Only half of the worm's body emerged from the ground, but when it stood upright, it was already more than 30 meters tall. It was a behemoth through and through. When the dark brown energy hit the Creation Tribulation cloud, it was like pouring boiling water on hot oil. It immediately caused the Creation Tribulation cloud to churn wildly. The second calamity of creation, which originally needed to brew for more than 20 minutes, immediately accelerated its formation. Red lightning surged in the tribulation cloud, and it seemed that it would not take more than 5 minutes for the calamity of creation's second attack to descend. This sudden change made the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer's relaxed mood fall to the bottom of the valley. Through its perception, it knew that this brownish-black worm covered in burrs had reached the high-class suzerain/myth 3. Although it had not reached the peak, it was only a step away. This high-class myth 3 insect species Fae caused the mother of Bloodbath's expression to change drastically. The hope that had just risen in its heart instantly turned into despair. The reason the mother of Bloodbath was in despair was not because of the brownish-black worm's grade, but because it was actually the infamous slaughter worm among myth breed Faes. The slaughter worm was a Fae with extremely high talent and level, and it had the ability to devour any law crystal. Despite not being of the same origin, the slaughter worm could absorb pitifully little law energy even if it devoured. However, compared to other myth breed Faes, being able to absorb law energy was an advantage. Under normal circumstances, Faes would rarely be attacked by other Faes when undergoing the world cleansing and the calamity of creation in the wild. Even if a Fae attacked, it would generally be a Fae that had comprehended the same elemental law. It was very unwise to have a dispute with a myth breed Fae for no reason. In order to endure the world cleansing and the calamity of creation, Faes would put their energy on how to endure the world cleansing and the calamity of creation. However, if the Fae gave up the chance to survive and launched a suicidal attack, it would involve other Faes in the range of the world cleansing and the calamity of creation. Then the calamity of creation and the world cleansing would become the Fae's attack methods. The attacker would likely perish together with the Fae under the attack of the world cleansing and the calamity of creation. However, the slaughter worm was different from other myth breed Faes. The intelligence of the slaughter worms had been reduced. What they had was an almost greedy instinct to devour and evolve, as well as the combat genes that had been fused into their bones. As an insect species Fae, the slaughter worm was still unable to transform into a human form even at myth 3. The biggest reason was that even at suzerain/myth 3, the slaughter worm was still a larva of the slaughter sky butterfly. After devouring enough law crystals and reaching the pinnacle of suzerain/myth 3, the slaughter worm would spit out worm's silk. The worm's silk would firmly weave on the thorns on the surface of the slaughter worm's body, wrapping the slaughter worm up. At this time, the slaughter worm would transform into a slaughter butterfly chrysalis. Once the slaughter chrysalis completed its transformation, it would immediately trigger the tribulation of creation. Among all the Faes in the world, only a few Faes with noble bloodlines could survive the creation tribulation almost 100% intact. This included one of the 3 supreme bloodlines of butterfly Faes, the slaughter sky butterfly. The slaughter chrysalis could perfectly withstand 3 attacks from the calamity of creation. The sturdy predator chrysalis' internal laws would shatter at the same time it evolved into a world of laws. The creation breed killer butterfly would spread its wings and soar into the sky from its chrysalis. The second was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 894. The mother of Bloodbath could not understand why it would encounter such a rare slaughter worm in the wilderness. What was the difference between this and encountering a whale in a cesspool? The slaughter worm did not give the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer any time to react. It immediately prepared to attack the creation tribulation cloud. Its hideous and terrifying grayish-black eyes stared greedily at the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer as if they were its food. The mother of Bloodbath knew that Endless Summer needed to focus on gathering the Enlightenment law that had been split into pieces. Could not be distracted. At this time, only it could resist the slaughter worm's attack. It could not let the slaughter worm's second attack hit the creation tribulation cloud. Otherwise, the second creation tribulation brewing in the creation tribulation cloud would descend. After the mother of bloodbath's hill-like body appeared, it pounced on the slaughter worm, which was accumulating energy to launch a second attack on the creation tribulation cloud. At the same time, the mother of bloodbath activated its skills, all-encompassing eyes, execution stinger, and 8 directional blood. The all-encompassing eyes helped the mother of bloodbath predict the slaughter worm's movements, allowing it to attack the path that the slaughter worm was about to dodge in advance. The mother of bloodbath's 8 spider legs stabbed toward the slaughter worm's body, but at that moment the slaughter worm's brown law power surged. The mother of bloodbath was unable to use its spider legs to stab into the slaughter worm's body and take the opportunity to inject its blood aura into the slaughter worm's body. It used blood grip to temporarily control the slaughter worm's movements, causing the slaughter worm to miss the attack that was about to take shape. At the critical moment, the mother of bloodbath activated the exclusive skill that it had obtained after advancing to a myth breed external blood bone. 3 red water blood snakes emerged from the blood-colored shadow behind the mother of bloodbath and slammed into the slaughter worm's skin, which was surging with the power of law. Because the 3 red water blood snakes had fused with the mother of bloodbath's spider teeth, they could be said to be the mother of bloodbath's strongest attack. However, after 3 attacks, they only pierced 3 bottle cap-sized holes in the slaughter worm's body. For the slaughter worm with its huge body, it was almost a negligible wound. When the mother of bloodbath saw that the wounds caused by the 3 red water blood snakes were about to heal, it hurriedly used this opportunity to inject its blood aura into the slaughter worms. At the same time, he circulated the power of the blood law and used blood grasp to temporarily control the slaughter worm. The slaughter worm's accumulated energy smashed into the ground beneath his feet. The mother of bloodbath knew that the slaughter worm's 30-meter-long body was still buried underground. This attack was equivalent to letting the accumulated energy of the slaughter worm hit its body. When the blood grip succeeded, the mother of bloodbath immediately jumped away. The slaughter worm hissed in pain under its own attack. A large patch of dry land in the wilderness turned into a dark brown quagmire as the slaughter worm surged over it, emitting a strange smell. The mother of bloodbath knew that the formation of this quagmire was due to the slaughter worm's blood being mixed with the mud. The slaughter worm was completely enraged. Its huge body directly drilled out of the ground. It curled its body and prepared to launch a melee fight with the mother of bloodbath and endless summer. At that moment, an old woman riding a huge flying fae that almost covered the sky rushed over. When she saw the slaughter worm, she shouted angrily, "Tyrant space snake dove, make the slaughter worm stop." At that moment, an old woman riding a huge flying fae that almost covered the sky and earth rushed over. Following the old woman's order, the huge flying fae under her feet opened up its tail. A huge snake head poked out from the long tail feathers on its tail. The snake head opened its mouth wide and shot out several chains formed from condensed hurricanes. These chains firmly locked the slaughter worm in place. No matter how the slaughter worm struggled, it was still unable to break free from the condensed hurricane chains. In the blink of an eye, the silver-haired old woman strolled in front of the mother of bloodbath and endless summer. After scrutinizing the mother of bloodbath and endless summer for a moment, the old woman smacked her lips and said calmly, "I originally wanted to catch the slaughter worm that escaped from the Insect Valley cage. I was trying to catch a slaughter worm that escaped from the Insect Valley's cage. I didn't expect to encounter an unexpected harvest. I actually found 2 myth breed fays that didn't form a contract with a spirit chi professional." The silver-haired old woman's words caused the mother of bloodbath's expression to freeze. The mother of bloodbath originally thought that this old woman had taken action to save its endless summer. It did not expect that the slaughter worm originally belonged to this old woman. However, the old woman's method had truly shocked the mother of bloodbath. After refining the 3 red water blood snakes, the mother of bloodbath had activated its exclusive skill, external blood bone. Under normal circumstances, it could not be at a disadvantage against 3 same-grade fays. Due to the slaughter worm's noble bloodline, it had expended a lot of effort to make 3 bloody holes in the slaughter worm's body. Yet this old woman had completely controlled the slaughter worm with just one move. It was obvious that this old woman was an emperor-class expert. The mother of Bloodbath did not want to cause trouble at that moment. Any unforeseen event could bring forward the calamity of creation. The mother of Bloodbath only hoped that Lin Yuan could rush over within 5 minutes. Looking at the old woman's scheming eyes, the mother of Bloodbath did not think that the old woman would be kind enough to help Endless Summer survive the calamity of creation. At the same time, the mother of Bloodbath felt a little regretful. When it had obtained the Crescent Moon Radiance card from the Moon Empress, it had immediately fused it with its blood law. If it had not fused the Crescent Moon Radiance card with the blood law in advance, it would have been enough to let Endless Summer use the power of law to fuse the Crescent Moon Radiance card and safely survive the calamity of creation. However, the Crescent Moon Radiance card and the blood law had completely fused and could not be separated. Even if it died, Endless Summer would still not be able to use the Crescent Moon Radiance card. At that moment, the silver-haired old woman in front of the mother of Bloodbath stretched out 2 fingers and pointed at it and Endless Summer. Both of you should know me. Now I will give both of you a way out. Join my Brahma insect cage and I will help this little tree transform into a creation seed. The mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer did not recognize this silver-haired old woman. After leaving the depths of the endless forest, they had basically stayed by Lin Yuan's side and had not come into contact with outside experts. However, Endless Summer and the mother of Bloodbath had heard of the Brahma insect cage. The Brahma insect cage was one of the top 3 factions in the Radiance Federation, and its strength was on par with the Rhine lifeforms and the whale ocean trade. It occupied the top 3 spots all year round. The mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer did not expect this silver-haired old woman to be a member of the Brahma insect cage. However, the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer rejected the old woman's offer without a second thought. The mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer, whose lives had been saved by Lin Yuan, would not choose to betray him even if they lost their lives. The silver-haired old woman did not expect these 2 myth-breed fays, who were in danger, to reject her offer. Her expression immediately darkened and she said coldly, "If you are not willing to join the Brahma insect cage, then I don't mind being the bad guy for once." At that moment, there was a slight fluctuation in the space beside the mother of Bloodbath. A youth's figure stepped out of the fluctuating space. The silver-haired old woman only heard the youth in front of her ask her indifferently, "Bad guy? How do you want to be the bad guy?" Sob, 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 sob. "I laid on the bed for a day and wrote for a day. Tomorrow I can finally be discharged and go home to lie down. Happy." End of this chapter. Chapter 895. Return kindness with enmity. The silver-haired old woman said subconsciously, "This old man doesn't want to take action and be tainted by karma, but that doesn't stop this old man from collecting their law crystals after they die during the Genesis tribulation." As the silver-haired old man spoke, his eyes suddenly widened. This was because the silver-haired old man realized that the young man's clothes were very familiar. The silver-haired old woman suddenly came to a realization. "Isn't this the Moon Empress's royal robe?" The silver-haired old lady had come into contact with the Moon Empress a few times and had also ascended the Leaning Moon Mountain to request the Moon Empress help in nurturing phase. The silver-haired old woman had gone to the Radiant Moon Palace several times to beg for the Sky Domination Snake Dove to evolve into a creation breed. Although she had spent a large amount of precious spiritual ingredients and law crystals, the silver-haired old lady was still extremely grateful to the Moon Empress. When the dominating space snake Dove advanced from Myth 2 to Myth 3, the snake head hidden in its tail feathers suffered a hidden injury due to the world cleansing. The hidden injury on the snake head caused the Myth 3 hegemon space serpent vulture to be unable to use its body to turn into a weapon. However, this injury was healed when the Moon Empress helped the Sky Domination snake vulture to become a creation breed. However, why would the Moon Empress imperial robe be worn by a youth? At the silver-haired old woman's level, her horizons were far beyond that of ordinary people. When he saw the material of the Moonlight Crown robe, he knew that it was definitely not an imitation. It was impossible to use such spiritual ingredients on a casually made moonlight robe. It was a known fact that most of the spiritual ingredients on the moonlight robe were exclusive to the Moon Empress. Moreover, the silver-haired old woman did not believe that there was anyone in this world who would dare to secretly copy the royal robe. It was a great disrespect to the Moon Empress to forge the Moon Empress royal robe in private. The silver-haired old woman looked at Lin Yuan's moonlight crown robe and realized that there was no moonlight crown pattern on his waist. The absence of a moonlight crown pattern meant that he was not wearing a moonlight crown robe. However, this discovery did not make the silver-haired old woman relax in the slightest. Instead, her heart tightened. The silver-haired old lady was certain that this young man and the Moon Empress had some sort of relationship. Thinking of this, the silver-haired old woman could not help but break out in a cold sweat. After Lin Yuan walked out of the spatial fluctuation, he hurriedly took out a small golden toad-shaped bag. The golden toad-shaped pouch looked like a live golden toad. This was the greeting gift that Chef Supreme had given him. It was a treasure artifact made from the skin and stomach of the treasure cave golden toad. The old woman saw Lin Yuan gently pry open the mouth of the golden toad in his hand, and a man with a clear face appeared in front of Lin Yuan. When the old woman saw this clear-faced man, she quickly bowed deeply. "Greetings, mysterious moon emissary." Since the silver-haired old woman's waist was bent very low, and the cold sweat on her forehead was increasing. A few drops of cold sweat flowed down his cheeks and landed on the dry land of the wilderness, stirring up a cloud of dust. After Mystic Moon appeared, she didn't pay any attention to the silver-haired old woman who was bowing to her. Even though there was a creation breed tyrant space serpent dove hovering above the silver-haired old woman's head, it blocked out the sun. Mystic Moon glanced at the creation tribulation cloud in the sky that was brewing the calamity of creation and said to Lin Yuan, "Young lord, the environment inside your treasure artifact is quite comfortable." "Your little highness, the environment inside your artifact is quite comfortable. Next, leave the problem of the creation tribulation to me." Lin Yuan's eyes were looking at the miserable mother of bloodbath and endless summer when he heard Mystic Moon's words. "Then I'll have to trouble Uncle Mystic." The mother of bloodbath was still in its original form, but it looked rather miserable. Many places on its spider body had been pierced by sharp objects. These puncture wounds had basically healed with the mother of bloodbath's powerful recovery ability. However, the surface of the mother of bloodbath's body still had a large amount of blood that had not dried up. Based on the wounds on the mother of bloodbath's body, Lin Yuan's gaze suddenly turned to the nearly 60-meter-long giant worm at the side. The mother of bloodbath's injuries must have been caused by the thorns on the surface of the giant worm's body. Endless Summer's injuries were much more serious, and its main body had almost been split in half by the calamity of creation. If Endless Summer had not shifted the positions of the two tree cores in the tree trunk, Endless Summer's tree core would probably have turned into ashes under the calamity of creation. According to Mystic Moon's perception, Lin Yuan knew that Endless Summer's two halves of the tree trunk were overflowing with Enlightenment Law fragments. After sensing the situation of the mother of bloodbath and Endless Summer, Lin Yuan's heart tightened and he sighed. "Fortunately, I came in time. Otherwise, Endless Summer would be in big trouble." Just the first attack of the calamity of creation had split Endless Summer's main body in half. With such injuries, it was undoubtedly a pipe dream for Endless Summer to safely survive the second attack of the calamity of creation. When the silver-haired old woman heard Mystic Moon address Lin Yuan as young lord, she immediately confirmed Lin Yuan's identity. The Moon Empress did not have any children, and in the Radiant Moon Palace, only the Moon Empress disciple was qualified to be addressed as young lord by Mystic Moon Envoy. The Nyx Assembly's official meeting was about to begin, and the Moon Empress disciple should be attending the Nyx Assembly's official meeting at Night End Palace. Why would he appear in the wilderness 3,000 meters away from the royal capital? The silver-haired old woman did not believe that Lin Yuan would ignore the Nyx Assembly's official meeting and come out for a stroll. Lin Yuan's objective was obviously to bring the Mystic Moon Envoy to help that small tree survive the calamity of creation. However, the slaughter worm that she had accidentally released had not only accelerated the process of the calamity of creation. She was even bewitched and wanted to recruit the Moon Empress disciple. With that thought, the silver-haired old woman lowered her head even more. Guilt and fear filled her heart. Unlike ordinary pinnacle factions, the Brahma Insect Valley had stood at the pinnacle of the pinnacle faction since 100 years ago. However, the more she knew, the more terrified the silver-haired old woman became when facing the Moon Empress. In addition, the Moon Empress had clearly helped her, but she had caused trouble for the Moon Empress disciple. What was the difference between her actions and biting the hand that fed her? Of course, compared to guilt, the silver-haired old woman's mind was filled with fear. The mystic moon envoy looked clear and gentle, but she was the most arrogant and ruthless when facing the members of the various pinnacle factions. After surviving the calamity of creation, the old woman did not dare to imagine what would be waiting for her. The mother of Bloodbath barely transformed into a human form and glared at the silver-haired old woman. Its expression could not help but be defeated. It was clearly Lin Yuan's path protector, but why was Lin Yuan more like its path protector at such a critical juncture? Looking at the youth in front of it, for some reason, the mother of Bloodbath's heart surged with a deep sense of peace. It was as though as long as it was by Lin Yuan's side, there was nothing in the world that could not be solved. The first time was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 896. Purple Sunset Beauty Butterfly. When Endless Summer saw Lin Yuan rushing over with Mystic Moon, she no longer had any concerns or worries. She started to concentrate on condensing the Enlightenment Law, which had already turned into fragments. With Mystic Moon around, she just had to do her best to gather the Enlightenment Law and wait for the next two calamities of creation to become a creation breed Fae. Endless Summer sighed. Up until now, Lin Yuan had given her 2 fortunes and saved her twice. It seemed like she would never be able to repay Lin Yuan's kindness in this lifetime. All she could do was to use the rest of her life to protect Lin Yuan and Sky City. At that moment, the slaughter worm that was bound by the sky snake dove's wind chains behind the silver-haired old woman began to struggle violently. The slaughter worm's attacks did not allow it to break free from the wind chains, but the slaughter worm's attacks did not allow it to break free from the wind chains' bindings. Instead, it caused it to suffer more severe injuries. The slaughter worm's cries simply made the silver-haired old woman want to curse. She had already tried to reduce her presence as much as possible, but this slaughter worm was actually playing around in front of the Radiant Moon Palace's young lord and the Mystic Moon Envoy. The silver-haired old woman felt that the slaughter worm, which she had previously treated as a treasure, was simply her jinx. Before the slaughter worm transformed into a slaughter sky butterfly, spirit chi professionals could not form a contract with it. At the same time, the slaughter sky butterfly was a butterfly fae that had an unremitting pursuit of extreme beauty. It would only submit to a beautiful butterfly fae that was recognized by the slaughter sky butterfly's genetic model. It would also protect and follow that beautiful butterfly fae for life. The silver-haired old woman had spent so much effort to nurture this slaughter worm because when the Brahma insect cage was breeding blue light butterfly goddesses, one of the blue flash butterflies had mutated when it evolved into a blue light butterfly goddesses. It had mutated into a purple light butterfly goddesses. The blue light butterfly goddesses had always been the most attractive among butterfly fays. Butterfly fays had always had a preference for purple and blue was second. When that purple light butterfly had evolved into a blue light butterfly goddesses, it would even receive the protection of other blue light butterfly goddesses and become the core of the butterfly group. The silver-haired old woman believed that this mutated purple light butterfly goddess should be able to gain the recognition of the killer butterfly. However, the purple light butterfly goddess that the blue flash butterfly had evolved into was no match for the blue flash purple butterfly, whose genetic model had been upgraded before hatching. This was the difference between innate and acquired. The purple light butterfly goddess and the blue flash purple butterfly were worlds apart. Rumor had it that after the blue flash purple butterfly evolved, it would become the purple sunset beauty butterfly. The purple sunset beauty butterfly had the ability to gain the support and control of the butterflies. Even the top 3 bloodlines among butterfly species phase would fall for the purple cloud beauty butterfly. However, no one knew if this rumor was true. As the silver-haired old woman listened to the incessant flopping sounds of the slaughter worms, she made up her mind and made a decision. In the silver-haired old woman's opinion, this was the only way to obtain the forgiveness of the Radiant Moon Palace's young lord. This was because the silver-haired old woman could already tell that the youth in front of her was the one who could become the mysterious moon emissary. With a thought, the silver-haired old woman shook her hand, and a tree core that contained boundless plant energy appeared in her hand. The silver-haired old woman lowered her head and took small steps toward Lin Yuan. She held the tree core with both hands and handed it to Lin Yuan. "My lady, this is the creation seed sky covering weeping willows tree core. If I let this small tree, Lord Tree use it, it might allow Lord Tree to obtain a transformation when it becomes a creation seed. The silver-haired old woman had lived for a long time and was an emperor-class expert, so she was very perceptive. After all, she did not make a move on the small spider and tree, so there was still a possibility of redemption. The silver-haired old woman's heart was spurting blood like a fountain when she took out the creation seed sky-covering weeping willows tree core. However, if the Radiant Moon Palace's young lord did not pursue responsibility and did not hold it against her for soliciting without understanding the situation, this creation seed sky-covering weeping willows tree core would be worth it. In that case, this creation seed sky-engulfing weeping willows tree core would be worth it. He might even be able to form a good relationship with the Radiant Moon Palace's young highness. At the same time, the silver-haired old woman did not bet everything on the creation seed sky-covering weeping willows tree core. When Lin Yuan heard the silver-haired old woman's words, his eyes narrowed and landed on the silver-haired old woman. The silver-haired old woman did not raise her head, but an emperor-class expert had an extremely strong spiritual perception. The silver-haired old woman naturally felt Lin Yuan's slightly narrowed eyes, and her heart tightened. Mystic Moon had been waiting for the second calamity of creation to descend. Helping Endless Summer survive the calamity of creation was not as simple as helping Endless Summer resist the calamity of creation's attack. Although it was possible to do so, Endless Summer would not be able to be tempered by the calamity of creation and allow the Enlightenment laws to sense each other. What Mystic Moon had to do was wait for the calamity of creation's second attack to descend and brace the calamity of creation's attack. Then it would split the calamity of creation's attack into 100 strands and temper Endless Summer one strand by strand, helping Endless Summer to obtain the greatest growth. Looking at the calamity of creation that was about to descend in less than a minute, bright silver patterns quietly emerged on Mystic Moon's exposed skin outside the silver robe. A power that seemed to be able to scatter the calamity of creation emanated from Mystic Moon's body. The power that emanated from Mystic Moon's body was also mixed with an indescribable pressure. This pressure was very similar to the dragon might of a dragon species Fae, but it was much stronger than the dragon might of a main dragon species Fae that Lin Yuan had felt previously. It was as though they were not on the same level at all. The aura that Mystic Moon released made the Sky Domination Snake Dove, which had been circling in the sky, hurriedly transform into its human form and lay on the ground like a little chick, not daring to move at all. The slaughter worm, which was originally struggling violently, also did not dare to make a fuss. However, compared to the Sky Domination Snake Dove's cowardly appearance, the slaughter worm was obviously much stronger. It even dared to secretly use its brownish-black eyes to glance at Mystic Moon from time to time. Mystic Moon sensed the creation seed sky-covering willows tree core that the silver-haired old woman had taken out. Young Lord, the creation seed sky-covering willows tree core is very useful for Endless Summer. This Endless Summer previously had a great opportunity and was actually fortunate enough to fuse with a life form Still Fire. This life form Still Fire even formed a tree core within Endless Summer's body, and it is in a unique cycle with the previous tree core. Mystic Moon let out a light snort. The tree has 2 cores. No wonder it is so capable to actually think of transcending the calamity of creation by itself. When Mystic Moon spoke to Lin Yuan, her tone might be extremely amiable, but when she looked at Endless Summer, her gaze was not gentle at all. In Mystic Moon's eyes, Endless Summer was a troublemaker that did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. The second was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 897. Silver Beast covers the sky. Mystic Moon had been feeling sorry for Lin Yuan in the treasure cave Golden Toad. When Lin Yuan had left, it was almost time for the civil, martial arenas to award the awards. It was time for Lin Yuan to uphold his glory in front of all the crowns. At this critical juncture, Lin Yuan had to rush over to help because Endless Summer had experienced the calamity of creation. It would take a long time to divide the calamity of creation attack into 100 strands for Endless Summer to temper. If Lin Yuan rushed over after Endless Summer safely survived the calamity of creation and became a fantasy breed, he would have missed the civil and martial arena awards. Even with the Moon Empress' help, the rewards would not be lesser. However, Mystic Moon felt that Lin Yuan had lost a chance to shine in front of everyone. Given Mystic Moon's understanding of Lin Yuan's current choice was within her expectations. Mystic Moon had long known that Lin Yuan was a warm and affectionate person. At that thought, Mystic Moon continued. The sky-covering weeping willow can grow lush willow branches that can cover the sky because the tree core contains a huge amount of plant vitality and germination ability. Even if an ordinary plant fey becomes a creation breed, it can forget about devouring the sky-covering weeping willow's tree core. Greed is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. If an ordinary plant fey devours the tree core, it will explode from the plant energy in the tree core. Endless Summer's original talent is not qualified, but because of the life form Silent Fire, Endless Summer has the chance to devour this creation breed sky-covering weeping willow's tree core. Under the balance of the life form Silent Fire and the baptism of the calamity of creation, this Endless Summer is likely to have 3 cores, and the 3 cores will be in a cycle. When a fey becomes a creation breed, it is destined to undergo an earth-shattering transformation. Endless Summer's transformation with the 3 cores will be several levels higher than before. It might even fuse with the bloodline in the heaven-covering weeping willow's tree core and evolve into a brand new species under the life-form sacrificial fire's balance. Mystic Moon's words were very clear. Lin Yuan's true data was still unable to detect the spiritual ingredients on a creation breed fey. However, based on Mystic Moon's words, Lin Yuan knew how important the sky-covering weeping willow's tree core was to Endless Summer. It would directly affect the nobility of Endless Summer's bloodline in the future. Since the sky-covering weeping willow's tree core was so beneficial to Endless Summer, he naturally had to give it to Endless Summer to use. Endless Summer's increase in strength was equivalent to increasing the strength of Sky City's top combatants. As soon as Lin Yuan had appeared, he had asked the silver-haired old woman in front of him how she wanted to be a villain. At that time, the silver-haired old woman had said that she wanted to attack the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer. Lin Yuan would immediately ask Mystic Moon to kill the silver-haired old woman in front of him. He would not give the silver-haired old woman a chance to plead for mercy like now. Those who kill will always be killed. This is an unchanging truth since time immemorial. However, the old woman had not chosen to attack the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer after failing to recruit them. Thus, Lin Yuan had allowed the silver-haired old woman to live until now. At this moment, the silver-haired old woman gently raised her head. Her face was covered in sweat, making her look somewhat disheveled. However, the silver-haired old woman spoke with an abnormally respectful expression. Your Young Highness, this sky-covering weeping willow's tree core is something that I obtained with great difficulty. It has been in my hands for decades. It's definitely the best treasure in our Brahma insect cage. The silver-haired old woman had just spoken when she heard Mystic Moon's cold shout. I, Mystic Moon, actually didn't know when you joined the Radiant Moon Palace and became a member. Do you think you are worthy of calling me your Young Highness? Looking at Mystic Moon's cold eyes, the silver-haired old woman had a bitter expression. The aura that Mystic Moon had just revealed made her Sky Overlord Snake did not even dare to think of resisting. He really didn't know which branch of the 8 meridians of creation had the mysterious Moon Envoy's strength reached, or had she already reached a higher level. Under Mystic Moon's reprimand, the silver-haired old woman hurriedly corrected herself. As my lady, I really did not make a move just now. The reason I appeared here is to chase the slaughter worm that escaped from the Brahma insect cage. Just now, this sky-covering weeping willow's tree core will be my apology for carelessly recruiting you. As for the slaughter worm's attack on the creation tribulation cloud, which caused the second attack of the tribulation of creation to happen earlier, I am willing to bear all the responsibility. I can hand the slaughter worm to you and let you do whatever you want with it. The silver-haired old woman's voice was a little hoarse. On one hand it was because of her heartache and on the other hand it was because of fear. The silver-haired old woman had been betting her treasure on the slaughter worm. If she gave up the slaughter worm, she would not be able to obtain the Moon Empress disciples' forgiveness. Even if she did not die today, the Brahma insect cage would pay a greater price for her recklessness. If the Moon Empress heard about this and got angry, the Brahma insect cage, which had dominated the top 3 factions for nearly 100 years, would immediately fall out of the top 3 factions. It might even be like the Sun family's Du Immortal Garden, hanging half-dead between the veteran factions and the top factions. She who had watched the Brahma insect cage grow stronger step by step, would also become the Brahma insect cage's sinner. Her entire life of hard work and the glory of her family had been ruined by her own hands. This made the silver-haired old woman feel even worse than killing her. At that moment, the silver-haired old woman saw the young man reach out his bony fingers to take the sky-covering weeping willow's tree core. Then he tossed it toward the small tree that was undergoing the tribulation and shouted, "Endless summer, try to use the life-form sacrificial fire to refine the sky-covering weeping willow's tree core. Let the tree core fuse into your body. If possible, try to draw out the sky-covering weeping willow's bloodline hidden deep in the tree core during the tribulation of creation. See if your bloodline can devour the sky-covering weeping willow's bloodline." Endless Summer had been trying her best to gather the shattered Enlightenment law. Endless Summer, who had been split into two, felt that the vitality in her body was constantly flowing away, and she was getting weaker. Previously, Endless Summer didn't have the time to listen to the silver-haired old woman and Mystic Moon's conversation. Now that she heard Lin Yuan's shout, Endless Summer forcefully diverted her attention. Endless Summer, who had diverted her attention, saw a tree core containing a huge amount of plant energy being thrown toward her. Endless Summer instinctively controlled her roots to burrow out of the ground and grab the sky-covering weeping willow's tree core. Then Endless Summer's split tree trunk suddenly shook, and the tree core formed by the life-form sacrificial fire and Endless Summer's tree core were all summoned out. Endless Summer placed the three tree cores together and let the life-form sacrificial fire's tree core contain the sky-covering weeping willow's tree core. The moment the life-form sacrificial fire's tree core came into contact with the sky-covering weeping willow's tree core, the leaves of the pinkish-purple hydrangea-shaped flower had all turned into ashes, and Endless Summer, who was only left with withered branches, emitted unprecedented vitality. At that moment, the second crimson tribulation of creation that was brewing in the world creation tribulation cloud suddenly struck down. Looking at the world creation tribulation cloud striking down, magnificent bright silver patterns appeared on Mystic Moon's forehead, cheeks and palms outside her silver robe. Mystic Moon's eyes also turned dark silver at that moment. Immediately after, a massive silver beast stretched across the sky. The third one. The blue flash purple butterfly has become more powerful, right? End of this chapter. Chapter 898. The night sky was bright, and the stars should have been bright under the cloudless night sky. However, the creation tribulation cloud covered the faintly discernible stars, leaving only a silver moon shining in the sky. A huge silver-white beast hovered in the sky without making the slightest sound. The beast's body shone with bright silver light and the silver moon in the sky, with a noble disdain for the world. The silver beast's aura, which was superior to that of a master dragon species Fae, seemed to magnify the entire world infinitely in an instant, allowing the entire world to shuttle to the depths of the primordial world. At that moment, the silver beast opened its mouth and spat. A spiritual energy that was about to crush and reorganize the entire world spread out. Lin Yuan and the Mother of Bloodbath only felt that this huge spiritual energy was too terrifying, but they were not affected by it. However, the silver-haired old woman was not so lucky. In that huge spiritual energy that seemed to crush and reorganize the entire world, a silver pearl quietly appeared. The moment the silver pearl appeared, the bowed old woman fell to the ground with a weak aura. The sky overlord snake dove, which was originally crawling on the ground, was like a quail waiting to be roasted. A stench swept across the tip of Lin Yuan's and the Mother of Bloodbath's noses, causing them to frown slightly. Lin Yuan looked in the direction of the stench and could not help but be dumbfounded. As a creation breed Fae, the sky overlord snake dove had actually lost control under the pressure of the Mystic Moon's main body. This was simply too shameful. Looking at the silver-haired old woman's state, Lin Yuan knew that the silver pearl that the Mystic Moon spat out was extremely lethal, but it was not targeted at him and the Mother of Bloodbath. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard the silver-haired old woman murmur in horror. Lady Mystic Moon Envoy has actually reached such a level. She has already produced a Dragon Ball. The silver-haired old woman's words were full of horror, and she had obviously suffered a lot of shock. Dragon Ball? This was the first time Lin Yuan had heard of this term. Even the most precious part of a master dragon species Fey was just the essence blood. He had never heard of a master dragon species Fey producing such a thing as a Dragon Ball. When talking to his master, the Moon Empress, Lin Yuan already knew that the Mystic Moon was not a human but a master dragon species Fey. Could it be that the Dragon Pearl appeared because of the special bloodline in Xianyu's body? Genius was currently learning the knowledge of Class 4 Fey Observer, Class 4 Spiritual Ingredient Analyst and Class 4 Scholar, and it was almost done. According to what Genius had learned, Lin Yuan was certain that it did not have any knowledge related to the Dragon Balls. The mother of Bloodbath was originally staring at the blue-silver behemoth circling the silver Dragon Ball, but when its spiritual energy sensed Lin Yuan's probing gaze, it spoke. Legend has it that when a dragon species Fey's bloodline reaches the level above the main dragon species, it can transform its essence blood into pearls. I always thought it was just a legend. I didn't expect it to be true. Looks like Lady Mystic Moon must have crossed the threshold of the Genesis realm and reached the immortal realm. In the process of explaining to Lin Yuan, the mother of Bloodbath deeply felt its own weakness. The mother of Bloodbath had always been very proud, but after becoming Lin Yuan's path protector, it had suffered blows again and again. The people protecting Lin Yuan had already reached the immortal realm, but he himself hadn't even reached Myth 3, let alone the Genesis realm. Upon hearing the mother of Bloodbath's words, Lin Yuan's pupils shrank. He looked at the blue-silver behemoth in the sky in disbelief and subconsciously used Morbius True Data to check Mystic Moon's body. With one look, Lin Yuan was shocked. When he had checked the creation breed phase True Data previously, even if he couldn't see what abilities and exclusive skills they had, he could see how many exclusive skills they had. The Sky Domination snake dove that was kneeling on the ground like a quail and the green and white snakes that he had seen in front of the moon stable had 4 exclusive skills. According to the number of exclusive skills, Lin Yuan could determine if a Fey was a creation breed Fey. However, Mystic Moon's True Data was full of question marks, and he couldn't find any information. This included the exclusive skills that Mystic Moon had. At that moment, Lin Yuan could confirm that Mystic Moon was indeed not a creation breed Fey. As for what grade Mystic Moon had reached, Lin Yuan didn't know at the moment. It could be said that Mystic Moon's strength had already exceeded Lin Yuan's understanding. At that moment, Lin Yuan only had one thought in his mind. Isn't my master, the Moon Empress, stronger? Lin Yuan felt that he had always underestimated the Moon Empress' strength. All of a sudden, the heavenly silver behemoth that was circling the silver Dragon Pearl let out a soft snort. The silver-haired old woman who was kneeling on the ground was like a rag doll as she violently vomited a few mouthfuls of blood. The blood was dark red and it was obvious that her internal organs were injured. The silver-haired old woman who was severely injured suddenly realized that she had kept her promise and actually wanted to investigate the Mystic Moon Envoy's background. Sensing her injuries, the silver-haired old woman's pale face revealed a smile of surviving a calamity. She knew that although Lin Yuan didn't say anything earlier, when he picked up the creation breed sky-covering weeping willow tree core, it was the same as forgiving her. However, Lin Yuan forgave her didn't mean that Mystic Moon had also forgiven her. Based on Mystic Moon's attitude toward Lin Yuan, she didn't just treat him as her young master, but she also doted on him as a junior. This was because when Mystic Moon spoke to Lin Yuan, apart from respect, there was emotional warmth. Her subconscious probing just now shouldn't have received such a severe punishment. However, the Mystic Moon Envoy had dealt a heavy blow to her. This meant that the Mystic Moon Envoy's attack was not only to punish her for overstepping her authority, but also to vent Lin Yuan's anger. After receiving this attack, this matter was considered to be over. In the future, she wouldn't be pursued by the Mystic Moon Envoy because of this matter. At that moment, a dragon's roar resounded throughout the sky, as though it could plunge people into the depths of the primordial world. The Mystic Moon, which was circling and flying around the Silver Dragon Ball, directly shot the Silver Dragon Ball toward the Crimson Calamity of Creation. Lin Yuan realized that the Calamity of Creation, which carried the power of destruction, had become the Silver Dragon Ball's toy in the next moment. Under the Silver Dragon Ball's silver brilliance, the Calamity of Creation's second attack was like a red earthworm. Under the Silver Dragon Ball's guidance, it revolved around the Silver Dragon Ball. In the sky, Mystic Moon, who had originally transformed into the pale silver behemoth, once again transformed into a human form. With a wave of her palm, the silver dragon ball that had intercepted the calamity of creation's second attack appeared in her palm. Mystic Moon wasn't in a hurry to separate the calamity of creation's attack to temper endless summer. Instead, she planned to wait for endless summer to absorb the creation-breed sky-covering weeping willow tree core's plant energy to recover to its peak state before tempering endless summer. At that time, endless summer wouldn't have to expend all its strength to forcefully gather the broken enlightenment law and passively endure the calamity of creation's baptism. Chapter 899. When endless summer recovered to its peak state, it could gather the shattered enlightenment law and guide the energy in the calamity of creation to wander between the shattered enlightenment law. It could strengthen the connection between the enlightenment law fragments. Laying a good foundation now would make endless summer's future path easier. Endless summer's life form silent fire rose into a jade-green flame and burned the sky-covering weeping willow's tree core. Under the burning of the life form silent fire, the sky-covering weeping willow's tree core was released as though it was free. Endless summer's tree trunk that had been split in half started to turn green under the immense amount of plant energy. This trace of green slowly grew into a sapling. Then, endless summer's trunk and branches seemed to be feeding the sapling, desperately squeezing out the remaining nutrients and injecting them into the new sapling. Immediately after, endless summer's nearly 100-meter-tall body turned into ashes and scattered on the soil. On the other hand, the inconspicuous new seedling was rapidly expanding and growing. 1 meter, 10 meters, 30 meters, 50 meters, 100 meters, 300 meters, and finally stopped at 500 meters. If endless summer's original trunk could be hugged by 30 Lin Yuans, now, even 100 Lin Yuans wouldn't be able to completely hug endless summer's trunk. In an instant, the sapling grew into a 500-meter-tall giant tree. The giant tree branches were full of new leaves, which instantly grew from the size of a sesame seed to the size of a palm. The branches grew luxuriantly on the 500-meter-tall giant tree, and it was as though a beautiful summer had bloomed in the wilderness in early spring. The leaves were layered and endless summer was in full bloom. Immediately after, the new green that had condensed in midsummer was suffused with pinkish-purple color. The entire tree was filled with flower buds that bloomed. In the blink of an eye, the 500-meter-tall giant tree was filled with football-sized hydrangea flowers. The pinkish-purple hydrangea flowers flourished and pressed down on the branches. Under the tree, Lin Yuan and the mother of Bloodbath bathed in the pinkish-purple flower rain. Seeing that endless summer had recovered to its peak state, the silver dragon pearl in Mystic Moon's hand spun gently. A streak of scarlet lightning as thick as a strand of hair was separated from the silver dragon pearl and struck at endless summer. Endless summer hurriedly controlled the flowers on the tree to resist the scarlet lightning attack. One by one, the beautiful pink and purple flowers broke away from the branches and collided with the scarlet lightning. After endless summer recovered to its peak state, it could gather the enlightenment-shattering law and assume a defensive stance at the same time. Seeing endless summer's defensive posture, Mystic Moon, who was holding the silver dragon pearl, hurriedly said, "Don't resist, the world creation tribulation that I created will not harm you. Go and draw on the wisps of power within the creation calamity to refine the shattered enlightenment law. Only then will you not let little His Highness down." When endless summer heard this, she waved her branches and removed her defensive stance, allowing the hair-thin crimson lightning to strike her body. Although this wisp of the calamity of creation's attack was not enough to hurt endless summer, it startled a tree and buried Lin Yuan, who was under it, alive. Before Lin Yuan was buried alive by the falling flowers, the mother of Bloodbath hurriedly carried him and hovered in the air. As he watched the mother of Bloodbath hug him, he touched the back of his head awkwardly. Under the sea of flowers, the silver-haired old woman staggered in the air and looked at endless summer with envy. The silver-haired old woman did not believe that there was a more comfortable fate in this world than endless summer's advancement to a creation breed. At that moment, Mystic Moon was simply using its power to help endless summer grow. Every time endless summer was struck by a strand of hair-thin crimson lightning, a rain of flowers would fall. The hydrangea-shaped flowers on the branches fell and grew again, repeating endlessly. However, under such meticulous tempering, time passed quickly. Endless Summer had about 3 minutes to digest each of the hair-thin crimson lightning crescent moons. However, the world creation calamity did not wait for anyone. After Endless Summer's 10th tempering, the third world creation calamity suddenly struck down. Mystic Moon did not even look at the third world creation calamity and just waved the silver dragon pearl in her hand. The third tribulation of creation was like another thick red earthworm that continued to be sucked over by the silver dragon ball and circled around it. Seeing that Endless Summer had adapted to the baptism of the crimson lightning, Mystic Moon slowly sped up. 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes, 1.5 minutes. In the end it was shortened to 30 seconds. Endless Summer's endurance was also getting stronger. After an unknown number of crimson lightning strikes, Endless Summer felt that the Enlightenment Law, which had been split into pieces, had faintly formed a connection. The connected Enlightenment Law fragments seemed to have formed a world full of enlightenment power. Mystic Moon nodded after sensing Endless Summer's state, seemingly exclaiming that Endless Summer's talent was passable. Seeing that Endless Summer was preparing to continue guiding the world creation calamity power to temper the Enlightenment Law, Mystic Moon said, "There should still be about 300 world creation calamities left. There should still be about 300 creation tribulations left. It's a waste for you to use these 300 creation tribulations to refine the Enlightenment world. Why don't you try and see if you can use the power of these 300 tribulations of creation to refine the sky-covering weeping willow tree core into your own tree core?" Endless Summer hurriedly tried to guide the power of the world creation calamity into the sky-covering weeping willow's tree core. Previously, Endless Summer had been using the life-silent fire to extract the plant energy from the sky-covering weeping willow's tree core in order to weaken the sky-covering weeping willow's bloodline strength. This would allow Endless Summer to better devour the sky-covering weeping willow's bloodline. As a plant fae, Endless Summer could sense that the bloodline hidden in the sky-covering weeping willow's tree core was far stronger than her own bloodline. Therefore, if Endless Summer wanted to devour the sky-covering weeping willow's bloodline, it would need to go through a difficult game. The power of these 300 world creation calamities was the most advantageous chip in the game. Endless Summer was very careful. She first used her tree core and the life-silent fire's tree core to surround the sky-covering weeping willow's tree core. Then she let the life-silent fire's tree core enhance her own tree core while suppressing the sky-covering weeping willow's bloodline power. Afterward, she used the hair-thin world creation calamity to shatter the sky-covering weeping willow's bloodline bit by bit. Each time she would only devour and refine a small portion of the sky-covering weeping willow's bloodline. Endless Summer had the intention to devour the sky-covering weeping willow's bloodline 300 times. Endless Summer's choice was very smart, and the implementation was very smooth. Endless Summer's original 500-meter tall body started to charge toward the clouds again. 500 meters, 600 meters, 800 meters. Endless Summer's body only started to slow down when it grew to 1,000 meters. However, Endless Summer's body was still growing at a visible speed. Endless Summer's original branches were very compact and relatively short. The branches and leaves were usually bunched together. Even if Endless Summer's original body was 500 meters tall, the treetop didn't look that huge. Now that Endless Summer had devoured the sky-covering weeping willow's bloodline, its short and lush branches might still be lush, but each of its short branches was rapidly extending. The extended branches made Endless Summer's treetop look like it had suddenly expanded by 3 times. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.